This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation and Adjudication will now come to order. Notice of the public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on Monday, July the 9th, with a second notice provided on Friday, July the 13th. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. On the agenda this afternoon, we have two bills. One is Bill 314-34, an act to add a new subsection 3 to title subsection 3 to section 3101A of Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to increasing the excise tax on occupancy for hotels and similar lodging house facilities, and to repeal section 16311 of Chapter 16, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to eliminating the requirement of voter referenda on tax increases. Second on the agenda is Bill 315, an act to amend Section 26202 of Chapter 26, Division 2, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to increasing the business privilege tax from 4% to 5.5%, and to repeal Section 1631 of Chapter 16, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to eliminating the requirement for voter referenda on tax increase. Looks like we have a number of people signed up to testify today, so if we can keep our testimony to as short as possible, and to please provide us with your written testimony. Rather than have the bills separately heard, I will allow you, as you come up in the order that you've signed up, to speak to one or both bills at the same time. It'll probably just go into the same committee report anyway. So why don't we proceed? Ken Leon Guerrero, Sedfrey Linzagen, gentlemen, as you can see from the crowd behind you, there's a number of people, so please keep it to your written testimony. I hope you have written testimony and not just going to. Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Leon Guerrero.
My name is Ken Leon Guerrero. I'm the spokesperson for Guam Citizens with Public Accountability. I'm here to testify supporting Bill 314, increasing the hotel occupancy tax. I support this bill because it generates badly needed revenue for our government in such a way as to do minimal harm to the people who work in the tourism industry, many of whom are in low-wage positions that require them to have 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Because when you increase taxes on those at the bottom of the economic ladder, you force them to make hard choices: food or power, gas or medicine, clothes or lunch, school lunches. That's not true with tourists. The Guam Visitors Bureau is on record saying the proposed tax increase would make Guam a more expensive destination, but no one who travels and decides whether to go to Bangkok, Macau, Manila, Sydney, Guam, Bali, Honolulu, or Beijing is basing their decision on room tax rates. They book their travel based on their expectations for unique experiences. Based on the numbers from the Japan Travel Bureau, the numbers of Japanese traveling abroad has been declining every year since 2012. The Guam Visitor Bureau's own survey points out one of the main reasons Japanese are not returning to Guam is the deterioration of the quality of the visitor experience and the lack of diversity of experiences offered on Guam for tourists. Based on the Guam Visitor Bureau reports, the numbers of tourists to Guam are increasing, but most of that growth is coming from South Korea and other places, and they aren't staying in the high-priced hotels. If the hotel industry wants to make Guam a less expensive destination, I suggest they consider lowering their room rates, because the lower room tax is not going to make the hotel any less expensive. And I'm talking about this from personal experience because a little over 18 months ago, on my 25th anniversary, I stayed at a local hotel for the weekend. The base room rate was $155, but the local room rate was $110. There was a $45 flexibility in the price, depending on whether I was foreign or whether I was local. So that was a 40% difference between the two base rates. Yesterday, preparing for this testimony, I contacted the hotel. I was quoted a base room rate of $220, and the local room rate is $185. So now we're looking at a 19% differential between the two room rates. Under this bill, the difference between the two room rates, the local and the premium tourist, is going to be $9 a night. Somehow I fail to see how raising the total cost of the room by $9 is going to convince a tourist to cancel a trip to Guam, spend $274 more to go to Hawaii, and pay a quarter point more in occupancy tax over in Hawaii. And I doubt that many tourists will change their minds about coming to Guam when the hotel tax increases from 11 to 15%, because they didn't stop coming when the room rates jumped 42% from $155 to $220 a night. What caused the hotel room rates to jump 42% between December of 2016 and now? Did financing costs go up 22%? No, we've been in a downward trend on financing. Utilities, they've gone up, but not 42%. And I can guarantee you, since this body continually refuses to pass a minimum wage increase, that the cost of labor did not go up 42%. As far as I can tell, the only thing that went up were the gross and net profit margins. Now, when you consider that everybody in this room is concerned about tourism because it is the third leg of our economy, I would be surprised if Guam Visitors Bureau isn't demanding that this tax go through, because this could be money used to improve the quality of our tourism experience. I stopped going to Agate Marina because they have a perpetually overflowing trash dumpster. You have the smells and the flies, and that is one of our big tourism destinations, not just for Japanese, but also for Korean tourists that are trying to engage in the many marine opportunities offered out of Agate. And the same thing for Cabras Island. I mean, it's hard to walk from Marine Corps Drive to Cabras Island, let alone take a car or a bus or a van out to the many tourist facilities that are out there. So if I were the head of the Visitors Bureau, I would be demanding that this bill be passed so that we could use those monies to improve the quality of our tourism experience so that we can go deeper into markets such as South Korea and Taiwan and China. All the other alternatives to increase government revenue have the same effect of increasing costs for the tourism industry as raising the hotel tax, but they have more negative effects on the people that work in the tourism industry. So raising the Business Privilege Act that I'll talk about in a second will have a more negative effect on the people that work there than raising the hotel occupancy tax on tourists who are willing already to spend $220 a night for a hotel room. So if increasing the, increasing the hotel tax, we need to somehow dedicate that money to make sure that that money is used exclusively to improve the Guam experience, which will encourage more tourists to come to Guam than holding the line at the 11% hotel occupancy tax. That's my testimony for 314. Any questions? Or should I just go into 315?
You can go to 315.
Okay. I am opposed to Bill 315. I understand the rationale behind the bill, but we're looking at the situation here right now where government in Guam is like an alcoholic or a drug addict, and they're not going to change their habits until we hit rock bottom. Passing Bill 315, giving them the additional revenue, just strings out the negative experiences and takes it longer for longer to hit rock bottom where real and meaningful change will take place. I say this because Guam today is standing at the edge of the financial cliff Puerto Rico fell over in 2016, and we still have that serious case in denial at Adelup. In spite of all the warnings that have been coming from many sources, Adelup has not changed and maintains their actions, as we saw with the veto of the override of the sales tax. When you consider the fact that only 13% of Guam's workers gross more than $40,000 a year, 60% of Guam's households earn less than $50,000, that's all incomes included, 2 or 3 jobs, husband, wife, and anybody else working in the household. And in spite of that, 34% of our households are on SNAP. It begs the question, how are people who are already struggling to survive, can't pay all their bills in the same month, going to dig deeper to pay more taxes to feed the government's addiction to spending? During the governor's last State of the Island address, he declared that Guam's future was a strong one, and in the same breath of air, he informed you and the people of Guam that we are on the brink of financial collapse, and without new taxes, there would be economic repercussions. As a perfect example of his refusal to deal with reality, for the past 8 years as the island's chief tax officer, he allowed more than $200 million to go uncollected. And instead of working hard to collect those taxes, he raised taxes on the most vulnerable part of the population, those trapped in low-wage jobs, people on welfare, and people living on fixed retirement incomes. Later that night, in his State of the Island address, after proclaiming that Guam was in dire straits financially and he was going to send down this tax measure, he proudly announced his plans to submit Guam's first billion-dollar budget. Well, with financial disaster coming down on the island in the way it is, his refusal to deal with the conditions as they are and keep counting on the military buildup that is on a slow roll right now, the only way I see the government changing its aggressive spending habits is it's going to have to hit bottom first. And this bill right here is throwing a lifeline, another lifeline, another lifeline, and is perpetuating the decline of the quality of life for all people of Guam, the strangulation of small businesses, and it's forcing more people to leave the island in search of more economic opportunity and lower cost of living. The final slap in the face of the tax holders was this amnesty. So now here we have a body of people who work very hard and diligently to pay their taxes on time so that this government can operate. And now the governor, instead of pursuing aggressively the $200 million of delinquent taxes that have been uncollected over the past 8 years, he's now waiving millions of dollars, millions of badly needed dollars of penalties and interest in an effort to collect pennies on the dollars owed. And what kind of message does that send to taxpayers like me? It's saying you were an idiot to pay your taxes. Is that really the kind of message we want to be sending to taxpayers? So, in addition to the Trump tax cuts, we have another whammy coming for this island, and that is going to be the Trump budget cuts. And I know the speaker has said it's being discussed in the SCS, but the people of Guam aren't privy to the conversations of the SCS, so we don't know what you guys are talking about, but nothing we have seen indicates that there's any serious planning to offset that, because all we hear now is that $140 to $150 million as a result of the Trump tax cuts, but we know that nearly 50% of the government of Guam budget comes from federal funding. And what are we going to do when those get cut? The public has been drained over the past years of nearly every amount of disposable income as a result of the steady increases in the cost of living and utilities, taxes, and government fees. So before you come to the people who struggle from day to day just to make ends meet and demand they give what remains of their meager disposable income to the government leaders need to show the people they are worthy and that they have changed their ways. So until Adelup gets out of the river of denial, starts facing reality, and begins a serious effort to collect delinquent taxes, reduce the cost of government operations, to live within its means like the rest of us do, there will be no public support for further increases in taxes or additional new taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Lansagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening to all of you. I respectfully oppose these two bills, Mr. Speaker, but I commend you for proposing government control on spending. I still remember what my dad told me. He was also a public servant and a legal advisor of so many congressmen. Son, when you are, in case you'll be supporting a bill, there are two factors that you need to consider. One, you need to have the data. Second, are you supporting the bill because it is for the betterment of the people? Now, let's go to the number one. That's the most important, data. You have the courage to introduce these bills because of the Trump tax cut. And you have said there's 145 million shortfall. And then the administration says 120 to 160 million. Some say 153 million. So there's a confusion. We don't know what is right. So what do we need to know? How will you dignify these two bills? We need to see the data. The data that I'm talking about is how they came up with this computation of 150 to 160 million. Based on the fiscal year tax collection revenue for the income tax, corporate tax, individual tax, and withholding tax, including interest, penalties. The total is $512,169,000. Now, the Trump tax cut only calls for reduction of 14% for the corporate tax, from 35% to 21%. And then also a reduction of almost 10% to income tax. Suppose for this 512 million, let's just deduct 20 million. That's already high. So the shortfall could be only $100 million. But I think the shortfall could run around 80 to 85 million only. And besides, all of the Trump tax cut shall, almost all of it shall take effect on next year. Only the withholding tax will be affected this year, this few months, and it was already been affected. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to read the editorial from the Investors Daily. The title is Tax Revenues Climbed 18 Billion in First Month of GOP Tax Cuts. Wait, weren't the tax cuts supposed to bankrupt the country to benefit the rich? It's almost like the tax cuts, which took effect in January, are paying for themselves. But that wouldn't be fair either, as the CBO notes, the new payroll withholding scheduled hadn't fully taken effect in January. Companies don't have to update their employee tax withholding until the middle of this month. When that happens, monthly revenues from individual income tax will likely slip. But the latest CBO report show how a growing economy can make up a lot of the difference between the advertised price of tax cut and the actual impact on revenues. The same revenue says that the revenue for the first 4 months of the current fiscal year, which started last October, were 46 billion higher than the same period. This comes from the Congressional Budget Office. Now there's another report, this is the latest, in April 10, from the Heritage Foundation. I just want to read some of the highlights. Again, the Congressional Budget Report shows spending on abysmal fat. It is popular to blame tax cut passed last year for this, but tax revenue is expected to fall by only 0.7% of gross domestic product this year, and spending is expected to climb by 3% of GDP. This is not a revenue problem. The government actually will take in $22 billion more in 2018 than it did in 2017. It is a spending problem. In fact, the economic power of the tax cuts may cover some of the Congress' fiscal sins. That's why, Mr. Speaker, the most important here is we need to get the data from the Office of Budget and Management to show to all of you how they came up with their estimated shortfall. Because this shortfall, in the end, will cost revenue.
Mr. Lanzagan, yes, that was provided to the SDS meeting at several meetings. In case you didn't get it, we'll provide you with a copy and I'll discuss it with you later. Do you have anything else to add?
Yes, because in the 620 years ago, there is this man by the name of Ibn Khaldun. He was considered a genius and regarded as a high intellectual. His ideas on taxation was copied by Dr. Arthur Laffer that produced the Laffer curves that demonstrated the relationship between rates of taxes and government revenues. Khaldun points out the economic consequences of the existence of the powerful elite. At the beginning of the political society, taxes are only used to provide the basic necessities. And as it becomes more civilized, the ruler imposes higher taxes to maintain their own increasingly opulent or luxurious lifestyle. Not only that this is an injustice that threatens the unity of the state, but is also counterproductive. In the long run, overtaxing discourages production, and it will lead to lower, not higher revenue. Look what happened to tax amnesty. You you waive the penalty, and people come to pay. Macy is doing a lot of sale, even Black Friday, July. Every week they have sale. That's why people are tempting to buy more. And it will end up to the government revenue. They will be paying more. If you will be increasing more taxes, there will be a lot of less tax evasion which will not be monitored. You know, just like Ross, dress for loss, dress for less.
Sedfree, thank you. Anything else that you want? Otherwise,
Well,
does anybody have any questions of these two? If not, thank you both.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mrs. Hong. Mr. Morinaga. The rest of the GVB board, because the two of you have signed up as GVB, are you coming? Yeah, bring whoever else you want to. Are you speaking, ma'am? No? Come for it.
Good afternoon, Senators. For the record, my name is Milton Morinaga. I'm the chairman of the board for Guam Business Bureau. We have a statement regarding the bill on the 15% raise on the hotel tax. Nathan will give a statement that we all agreed on. Thank you.
Hafa Speaker Cruz and honorable senators, thank you for this opportunity to submit testimony on bill number 314-34, an act to increase the excise tax on occupancy of hotels and similar lodging house facilities. As tourism continues to be our island's primary economic driver, it is the responsibility of the Guam Visitors Bureau as a representative of our members and the local community to provide essential information to our elected leaders when considering laws and regulations that directly affect our visitor industry. The importance of Guam's tourism industry cannot be overstated. GVB conducts the Tourism Economic Impact Study in order to measure the effects of tourism on our island. This TSA report provides valuable key performance indicators relative to visitor expenditures, government revenues, and jobs. GVB conducted the study every 5 years, but this information is so valuable that it has become an annual study. The latest 2016 report presents a direct correlation between tourism expenditures and overall visitor arrivals. So for FY 2016, total tourism economy sales, or the total of impact of our visitors, equated to about 1.85 billion, which is a 32.1% increase from fiscal year 2010. For that same time period, our visitor arrivals grew by 29.1%. The growth in the tourism industry along with visitor spending supported 21,100 jobs, an additional 2,696 jobs for our economy compared to just 2010. In other words, tourism supports around 34%, 1 in every 3 jobs of all employment on our island. The TSA report also stated that the visitor spending directly supported 100% of employment in hotel lodging, 50% of total retail employment, and about 42% of employment in the food and beverage industry. This equates to around $617 million in the form of tourism labor income or the compensation to our workforce. The 2010 study also stated that tourism expenditures contributed $150 million in taxes to the general fund in 2010. As of 2016, those tax revenues grew significantly by 73.3% to $260 million, an additional $110 million to the government of Guam. So tourism is doing its part to contribute to the overall ability of the government to provide essential services to the public. So there is a direct correlation between the growth in tourism and the increase in government revenues. For FY 2018, the TAF, Tourism Attraction Fund, is projected to collect $44.6 million, which is utilized for the following services. We have the hot bond, which is a roughly $6.9 million or 15.7% of the TAF, which went to the Guam Museum and other capital improvement projects throughout the island. UOG, GCC, and other educational programs gets $334,000, about 0.75% of the TAF. GPD and GFD, $4.1 million or 9.3% of the TAF. Department of Administration, Agriculture, and the EPA, $628,000, which is 1.4% of the TAF. The Department of Parks and Recreation and the Mayor's Council together get $6.5 million from the TAF, 14.7% for beautification maintenance of public parks and restrooms and operations. Department of Chamorro Affairs, the Chamorro Language Commission, the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, and other cultural groups is getting about $4 million, or about 8.9% of the TAF for cultural preservation and operations. And GVB is receiving about 54% of the TAF at around $24 million. So you can see the TAF is definitely helping to alleviate a lot of the general fund obligations that were normally paid, a lot of the government operations that were normally paid by the general fund. So in May 2017, the Guam Visitors Bureau submitted its request for its FY 2018 budget. In our letter, GVB outlined several issues facing our tourism industry due to external factors. In June of 2017, at our budget hearing, GVB reiterated these concerns and provided a detailed roadmap to turn the tide and reverse the declines experienced in our Japan market, Guam's top visitor source market. In August of 2017, Guam was then threatened by North Korea in August, and this triggered a negative impact to an already struggling Japanese market. In fact, arrivals from every source market to Guam except for South Korea saw decreases due to this North Korea rhetoric towards Guam. With the changing landscape of today's global traveling public, there is still much work to be done to ensure a sustainable industry on Guam for future generations. Over the last several years, Guam has been experiencing major challenges in Japan. The reason for this decline in Japanese arrivals was in part due to the following factors. One, increased competition from Southeast Asia, Okinawa, and Hawaii. Guam has become a more expensive destination, also heightened because of the weakened Japanese yen, and we've seen a decrease in air seat capacity between Japan and Guam. So Japan is a mature market for Guam and requires additional investments to restore our market share and long-standing relationships we have built over the last 50 years. On the other side, the Korean market has experienced unprecedented growth that contributes to the increase in overall arrivals to our island. It's a young market and developing market for Guam, and additional funding is still needed to support and maintain that growth. Some of the challenges for the Korean market is going to be developing repeat visitors from Korea through product enhancement, sustaining all the flight capacity we have while developing additional capacity, and attracting the different traveling segments to include educational groups, business groups, and ecotourism visitors. So Guam is primarily considered an affordable short-haul leisure destination to many of our major source markets. Our proximity to Asia enables our visitors to conveniently experience America in their backyard. However, our island's affordability and convenience also suggest that we are highly sensitive to price changes and costs. In a recent letter to GVB, the Japan Outbound Travel Council, Guam is seen as a relatively expensive destination for what it has to offer. And in their letter, they stated, although there was no sudden fluctuations in the exchange rate, the yen remains weak, and overall there is a sense of services, including accommodations, being expensive. So according to GVB's economists at Tourism Economics, and Senators, I also will be including the letter from the Japan Outbound Travel Council, which I will include in my attachments, as well as the report I'm going to talk about right now. So according to our economists at Tourism Economics, the hotel industry on Guam may experience an average price elasticity of minus 1%. So this means that any 1% increase in the price will cause a minus 1% fall in demand. For our visitors, any increase in the price of hotel rooms is evident upfront as part of their advanced travel planning. So this increase in cost to accommodations may influence visitors to shift to another destination or shorten their length of stay. So Bill 314-34 seeks to increase the hot tax from its current 11 to 15%. However, this was combined with the current increase in the business privilege tax, a hotel room is already currently now taxed at 16%, the 11% plus the 5% BPT. Should the proposed BPT increase to 5.5% and combined with the increase to the hot at 15, each hotel room would be now taxed at 20.5% per room night. Guam's current hotel average daily rate is estimated at around $207 per night, and that 20.5 tax amounts to $42.59, making the total per room night at $250.34 average. So in comparison, currently Hawaii's transit accommodation tax, which is basically their hot tax, the rate was 9.25%, and they raised it to 10.25% current. Combined with this, Hawaii's general excise tax, which is their BPT, is 4%, which is so a room night stay in Hawaii right now would be taxed at 14.25%. So Guam is already taxed at a higher rate than Hawaii. To provide further background on the risk that the tax increase may deter tourists by raising costs, the GVB engaged Tourism Economics, an Oxford economics company. This is the same company we work with for, as I mentioned, the tourism satellite account, our economic report. So they're quite familiar with Guam and our tourism. To independently research the potential impacts on visitor spending and Guam's broader economy. As summarized in the report, which I'll distribute to all the senators, a As summarized in the report, the research consisted of a scenario analysis in which drew on their experience modeling inbound visitor arrivals and prior research to estimate potential impacts to visitor spending. They estimated that the impacts to Guam's broader economy using the tourism satellite account study, which they conduct for GVB. So these, I'll highlight some of their findings. A combined increase to the occupancy tax and BPT could cause Guam to lose approximately 201 to 525 million in visitor spending over the first 5 years of implementation. This represents the loss of 2.9% to 7.5% of visitor spending on a stabilized year basis, equivalent to the loss of 175,900 to 459,800 visitors over a 5-year period. The loss of visitor spending will lead to a decrease of 271 million to 708 million of total economic output, Guam business sales, resulting in a loss of 40.3 to 105 million of total wages and salaries for local residents. On average, 200 to 523 fewer jobs will be supported by Guam's visitor economy. To maintain job levels, Guam would need to replace these losses with growth in other sectors. Also, due to the decrease in visitor spending, Guam is estimated to realize a loss of 23.4 million to 59.1 million of tax revenues over the first 5 years, but this is excluding the impact of the tax revenue that would be generated as a result of the tax increases. In other words, these tax revenues decreases would represent a partial offset to the overall tax revenues expected to be raised through the increased taxes. In an alternative scenario in which the BPT is raised by 1.5 percentage points on its own without increasing the occupancy tax, they estimated smaller negative impacts. Guam's visitor economy is not only the largest industry on Guam measured on the basis of employment, but also Guam's most important export industry, and therefore brings new dollars into the local economy. Tax alternatives such as replacing lost corporate income taxes and individual income tax revenues with similar taxes, or by increasing property taxes, would be expected to less negatively impact such a crucial export industry. So GVB, for these reasons, is opposed to Bill 314-34 for the reasons outlined below. As I mentioned earlier, Guam is generally seen as an expensive destination, especially when compared to our competition like Southeast Asia. Contracts with travel wholesalers. Hotels negotiate contracts with travel wholesalers in advance for up to 1 year. So most contracts are signed in place beginning April 1st through March 30th of the following year. So these contracts include all current applicable taxes, including the current gross receipts tax and the hotel occupancy taxes. So these contracts would force the hotels to absorb the cost associated with any increases in hot taxes or other taxes through the end of the current contracts, which may affect the hotel's ability to hire or the current number of jobs that they support. Taxes on a hotel night stay. So as I mentioned earlier, we would effectively be moving, if you added both taxes, from a 11% plus 4% on the BPT or 5% now to almost 20.5% if you add up the 15% plus the 5.5. So we respectfully propose and are ready to discuss less impactful solutions as a way to mitigate the shortfall caused by the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which include increasing efforts to aggressively collect taxes owed to the government, replacing lost income tax revenues with similar income-based taxes, and increasing other broad-based taxes such as property tax. So while the Bureau understands the need and urgency for revenue enhancement options for our government operations, we cannot provide support for Bill number 314-34 at this time. An increase in the hotel occupancy taxes will probably have the reverse effect that the bill intends, leading to a decrease in arrivals and then a decrease into jobs and a decrease in tax revenues to the general fund. Jesus Masi again for allowing GVB to testify regarding this measure and for your continued commitment in making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit. Jesus Masi, thank you.
Do you have testimony in 315? Do you have separate testimony in 315?
I do not, no sir.
Mrs. Hong, do you wish to testify?
My name is Mrs. Young-Suk Hong, the GBB Board of Director and the business owner. I'd like to do offers on the bill number 315-34, tax increasing 5% to 5.5%. Currently, that our business is kind of very hard. For all of the business that we've been paying 4% tax, and once they increase 5% tax, we cannot lay off the employee, and already the wholesale has been increased their price. And we do have wholesale, some of the wholesale business, and we already have contract with a couple of the hotel and couple of the companies based on our current price. So if you're increasing the GRT to 5%, we are losing from there, and this is the middle of the year, and we do have contract all the way up to the December. So I offered on the tax increase to 5.5%. And not only that, Guam is very hard to bring the merchandise direct from the state side. All the ocean freight and the oil base has been increased. And our salary has been increased. And the plus that we have a lot of stress from the inspector from the public health, fire department. Every regulation has been changed. And we all have to follow that. But this tax increase that I do have 90 employment in 2 stores. And already wholesale prices went up. And then when I support the week program or some of the hotel, the price, we've been setting up already up to December. And we cannot increase by the middle of the years. So what if this all my losses, who's gonna cover on that? So our offers on the bill 315-34, not on this time, maybe for the beginning next year, for the new fiscal year for January, but other than the tax increase of the GRT, I was thinking about how about the property tax increase on the government of Guam. I notified that, Guam property tax is much, much lower than the state side. Most of the state side, they charge property tax is high, but Guam, we've been paying so low. So some of them say, if we increase the property tax, what if the people cannot afford, provide the property tax? Why they don't do the exemption for the property tax, if the people cannot afford on that? We do have many other tax to be increased, property tax, driver license tax. Not only that for the business, every, the license that we've been paying high now, the liquor license, and then we have a sanitary permit fee, processing fee, a lot different than before. They all divide separately before. We only pay business license fee before, but they do have all increase on the tobacco tax, everything. Plus this GRT, going up to 5.5% on middle of this year. What if we lose our contract? Do I have to just lose that money? And how the government gonna be? And I do also have a lot of GSA contract also. Plus that we've sold a lot of gift certificate. And the gift certificate, it holds 5 years. And then we've been based on the gift certificate to sell current price. What the meaning is, if $50, when we sell to GSA, sometimes we give them discount for the 5% and things. It's not cover all my expenses. So I offer on the bill 315-34. Also, it's not on my business side on the 31-34. Guam has been tourist, our economy is a tourist economy. It's been last 50 years. We don't even say Guam is tax-free or whatever. All tourists, they come on Guam. They know it's tax-free. In the middle of the year, if you increase hotel occupancy tax 11 to 15%, how the hotel and how the guests how they're gonna handling on the middle of the year. So all your bill, opposed right now for the 314-34 and 314-35, I'm opposed to on these bills.
Thank you very much. Milton, did you wish
Yes,
to?
if I may. I just want to stress a point that I've been seeing that the tourism industry is being targeted here. because that's the easy money. It's right there. It's like ATM. Just put in your card, make a bill, saying, okay, increase the tax. Okay, hotelier, you pay the tax, and we charge the customer. But the thing is, every time when we meet here in this room, I can't stress that the tourism is very sensitive and fragile. One small mistake that we make by increasing any taxes or any wrongdoing in our facility or anything, the word will go out, saying Guam is no place to come. And they have better choices. It's different from 15 years ago. 15 years ago, there were no choice of LCC, low-cost carrier, flying. Those things wasn't available. Now it's available. People have a choice now. And by just to subsidize this 164 million is everybody's problem. That is the people who live here, people who do the business here, is our responsibility to how to recover or how to fill this debt. But the thing is, it's not the tourists' problem. Tourists here, they are our income source. We need to take care of them to keep repeating and come here. By taxing them and not giving the facility that they require is going to deteriorate the program, the tourism. Once we deteriorate, we're going to have a hard time to recover. Already, you've seen an example when the North Korea, as the President mentioned, once the North Korean gave us a threat, look what happened. Japanese just turned backward. But Korea and South Korea came, thanks a lot, but the Japanese never recovered that year. Now slowly it's recovering, but it's not fast enough to recover in the hotel occupancy. I just want to let all the senators be aware, I understand we have a debt. We need to find a way to fill this. There's other ways that I think we can put our heads together to collect debt, collect the money somewhere, somehow, that this is everybody's problem. All the people that live here, do business, is problem. So we have to do this. It's just because the Fed did this new tax law, we got hit hard. But we need to take care of this. But please, please, don't target the tourism as an easy money source to recover the loss that we're going to have at 164 million plus. I just need to protect my tourism because that is the only source we have for this Guam. And that's a statement I need to make. We need to protect this business.
Thank you very much, Milton.
Thank you.
Milton, how many hotels do you have under you?
I have 5 hotels and 1 golf course. Okay. And 1 more coming, 6 hotels.
All right. Can you name the hotels?
Yes, going from Sheraton, Hilton, PIC, Hyatt, Nikko Hotel, and we are at the stage of building another hotel where we are having another problem in that because of the HGB worker. We can't have that thing to be open on time.
All right. For the Hilton, how much was the weighted room rate 5 years ago?
The room rate right now, we're looking at only $197.
And how much was it 5 years ago?
That's putting together with the Korean market.
How much was it 5 years ago?
Pardon?
How much was it 5 years ago?
5 years ago, $150 or less.
So you
it
guys
depends
have
on
increased
it depends on the season, of course, and during the summer, during the winter, the rate will go up because we charge the 3rd person and 4th person. During the regular time, it's a double occupancy. We call it 2 in a room. Is the same rate. So only time when you see a jump on the room rate is when you have a family or 3rd or 4th party.
But you're admitting that your room rate has gone up from 150
Yes, it's gone up, yes. But slowly we raised it. We did not raise everything at one time.
And has the hotel occupancy tax gone up during that same period?
Pardon?
Did the hotel occupancy tax go up in that same period?
No. The hotel occupancy tax, the last increase was, I believe, was 15 years ago. 11 was brought down from 15 to 11%, and it has stayed at that. And as a business, we had not object originally for that increase for the GRT. We were okay with that because that's our responsibility doing business in Guam. We were ready to pan out that money. But now with 5.5, I'm not going to object to that. But to as everybody stated, we cannot change our play game middle of the year where that means that's an extra expense for us to pay because we have a contract that we have to abide to. And yes, sir.
All right, but you don't oppose the 5.5?
Yes. I mean, I have to make a choice. Am I going to, like I said earlier, we're here to try to subsidize as much as we can as a business, a responsible company in Guam, that we are ready to put that. If I have a choice, yes, I don't want to. But if I have to, okay, let's go for that, but not with the hotel tax. Because you see in the back of my, back here, these are all the tourism industry people. Their livelihood is to make sure the tourists come from Japan, Korea, and all over the world. But once they start not coming, they're going to be the one who's going to be laying off people and scale down their business. So let's see if the government can scale down on their business too, as a business is not around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Morinaga,
Yes,
I can
sir.
just ask you a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I know that Mr. Denine mentioned about the North Korea situation when in fact the tensions had built and there was a significant drop in, or there was an impactful reduction in number of tourists that came to Guam. Did your hotels also realize reduction in
Yes, we
tourists?
got hit very much on the Japanese market. So we have to go out to the Korean market who had no doubt that they were not going to come to Guam. So we have to go out and sales pitch the Korean market.
So what were some of the business decisions that you made as a result of the reduction of your business?
Okay, the first is that we have to discount the rate on the Korean market because they will not afford to pay a higher rate on a package. Same thing with Japan. As you can see already, United announced that they will bring back the 777. Lucky, yay. Thank you very much, United, because of their belief in Guam that they see some increase. But when the North Korea threat came, as soon as that threat came, the Japanese market fade out, they turned into 737, and that tells you already the market was slow. So yes, we have to recover somehow. We got to pay. We got to keep these people employed. We cannot just sit in our back seat and say, okay, let's wait till the business
I
comes
understand.
back.
I understand. In
Yeah.
this particular case, so you discounted rates so that you can attract more of the South Korean visitors.
Yes.
What
And
were some of the other initiatives that you had to implement?
we have to include some meals, including with the package rate, or we give different type of room category upgrade them, run of the house to upsell the rooms. And the other things that we did was that we went out to we call it FIT, on like the Expedia or internet booking. We have to do more on the special rate for the day, and then we played the game of yield management, and that's how we did. Some busy time we raise the price, some slow day we discount the price. So we have to play around.
So I'm hearing from you that your team was a lot more aggressive in terms of pursuing additional visitors coming and originating from South Korea.
Yes.
So were there any reduction in costs that your businesses had to implement as a
Yes,
result of?
by doing that, we have to, all over the hotel, we need to cut costs. That means food costs, including downgrading some of the material, the food items that we need to shut down, hours of overtime. So when the business is slow, we need to control our expenses. And expenses could be the food and beverage, overtime, and whatever that necessary that if the people can, if the people don't need to work overtime, then we try not to. So if the business is slow, like by 9 o'clock, if you don't see anybody eating, we'll shut the restaurant down. So it's impacting a lot of the people who thought they would have 8 hours of work, they won't. And that goes to everybody. It's not only our hotel. I'm sure that other hotels are facing the same thing. We have to fill the hotel rooms. If we don't, it's just stay idling, and we don't see money coming in. So,
And I appreciate your response because you certainly looked at it from different perspectives. One is finding ways to increase your number of visitors so that you can maintain or sustain a certain level of service to your customers. And then the other component is you also looked at realistically reducing expenses in different areas until things started to show a positive incline. So I appreciate, Mr. Morinaga,
yes.
your statement today.
If I can add one more thing there, we as a big industry here in Guam, we need to protect employment. Okay, so we need to make sure the rooms are occupied. We keep the people employed. A good example is when the typhoon came, the last big typhoon, we had to shut down a lot of hotels, but we kept a lot of people employed by cleaning the room and do whatever we can to make sure they get paid.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Morinaga, how many of your 5 hotels have a QC?
Right now, we have Nico Hotel QC. Not Nico Hotel, I'm sorry, the hotel that we're building right now. And the other one is ongoing, I believe was Sheraton. That's it. We just paid off the last QC on the PIC.
And the Sheraton's QC
Is
gives you a break on what tax?
that
what
was an
taxes?
old QC from way 10
And
years.
yes, and what tax?
I'm
are
sorry,
you-
I don't have that in.
No, which tax don't you have to pay? Do you have to pay the BPT on?
Usually, we don't have to pay is the property tax. Is one of the biggest item in the ticket item and the expenses and the GRT, I believe.
And GRT?
I think so.
And so the Sheraton doesn't pay the BPT,
Yes.
GRT, and it wouldn't be affected by the 5.5 anyway?
But we have all other 4 hotels that we pay GRT.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Knight, in trying to calculate the rates, I noticed in the bill there's also a section on page 2 that refers to the rate for bed and breakfasts. And does GVB also track, when you talk about increased visitors to Guam and increased spending, do you also track visitors that make use of B&Bs on island? Do you understand how many are lost to the B&B sector as opposed to hotel users?
That's a very good question. Do we track directly? No. That's a function of rev and tax to track businesses, so we don't have access to the information. As more and more go online, we're looking at ways, if there's ways we can use different software to track different B&Bs, but currently we do not know.
The reason I ask is when you go online, there are about 300 Airbnbs for Guam alone, which is a significant number if you think about what the room occupancy would be for a hotel and the lost revenue there. Do you have an opinion about if there were to be a corresponding increase to the hotel occupancy taxes? Do you think that there should also be a corresponding increase to the B&B rates as well? Because the tax rate right now for B&Bs in this law is 4%, and this bill doesn't propose an increase. But I'm just thinking about in terms of parity in hotel or lodging rates for a traveler to Guam, because you're talking about the effect on the traveler to Guam. And if there are 300 that are showing up on Airbnb, then that suggests that a large percentage of your visitor market is making use of that.
Yeah, I think excellent question. I think we have to be very clear. I think people get confused because Airbnb is the most popular platform for booking, but they're not booking B&Bs. Most of what they're booking is vacation rentals. So vacation rentals are taxed at the same rate as the hotels. A true B&B is different because you're pretty much renting out a room in your home. So yeah, I think the consideration at the 4% for a true B&B where someone is cooking someone breakfast and someone is staying in your home and getting that local experience is very different than someone renting a condo or in Tumon to visitors and they don't stay there, right? And it's just another accommodation. So I think those are the two factors. So I think whatever the rate is for vacation rentals should be the same as the rentals for the hotels. But I think B&B, that's why the rate was 4%, because to distinguish between those two things. And I think the folks, there was a bill passed to allow the government to work with Airbnb to collect the hot taxes. And I know Rev and Tax has been working with Airbnb. I think there's some areas that they need to iron out legally to make that happen. But I think that would be the best way forward to allow the platform to work for the island and collect those taxes.
The reason I bring it up is when you're talking about tourism and what drives tourists and what disincentivizes tourists to come to Guam, when you've got one pocket of lodging that is far less in cost and effect than hotels. I mean, it's hard to talk about the industry-wide without acknowledging this segment and maybe having a corresponding, because it's almost an underground type of establishment if there are so many listed but so few licensed, according to Rev and Tax. There's clearly a gap there, and although at some point GVB, I recall, testified that they're in favor of B&Bs because they only help to provide for the inventory of lodging available on island, which then allows more people to come to the island. The capture on the potential revenues and tax revenues on that is grossly disproportionate. So I think that that's an area that perhaps we have to look at as well, because it all goes to what drives tourists to Guam and what sustains tourism on Guam. So
yeah, so 100% I agree with you. I think the vacation rentals, which is very similar to a hotel stay, should be taxed the same. And that's why I'm just differentiating between a true bed and breakfast, which is someone, a local person opening up their home, they have to live there, they have to rent out that room and provide the breakfast, is a kind of a different situation than a true vacation rental. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think we need a even playing field for all the accommodations, and we need to make sure that everyone is playing and regulated and following the rules. So that's something that the Bureau has been advocating for, and happy to work with our partners and the other agencies to make that happen. And
I think the operative word is regulation, because I believe that essentially is it. If you've got so many out there and so few, that are legitimately identified and taxed, is another issue that I think we have to look at. But thank you. I just caught that, because we're talking about increasing from 11 to 15% on one end, and then the other. I don't want to use the word underground because that's unfair, but perhaps unregulated or loosely regulated is more accurate on the other end. But thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I may, Senator Torres, yes, you're absolutely correct that vacation rental is on-tap market right now from the rev and tax purpose. We have a regulation. We got everything set and go. I think we need to do is we need to enforcement. That's the thing that we need. How can we enforce to collect money? And I'm ready to support the Department of Rev and Tax to increase the enforcement agent so we can go and collect the money who is not paying their dues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering, Mr. DeKnight, you were testifying about how much money was generated in taxes by the tourism industry. Are you able to track the profit of the tourism industry? Has that changed over the years, and have there been increases in recent years?
Sorry, ma'am. Profits are internal to companies and not easily shared. But maybe you could ask.
Well, I was just asking you as so GVB doesn't track that or have any information, or your experts aren't able to analyze that for you, like some of these expert analysis that you've sent us.
Yeah, no, ma'am. So really, the factors they're looking at is total economy, sales to the economy, then the jobs generated, also the taxes generated. But the profits, those are not. You need to audit people and see their profits. All
right. Well, so the business tax rates used to be between 25 and 39%, and now the corporate tax rate's a flat 21%. And so I'm just wondering if you were able to, if you have any analysis of what that looks like for Guam's hotel industry or hotel businesses. Is there any reason? I mean, what have they done, I guess? Have you seen any trends of what they have done with the savings?
Yeah, I mean, good point. I think, in the debates that we were having about the lost revenues, there was a tax cut to the corporate tax structure. So where are those corporate tax going? It's a little bit of a compressed window, really, to determine impacts. But, in the tourism industry, as the chairman spoke of earlier and I spoke of, really, after August, we were scrambling to recover after the negative news. So, we were losing flight service, and, we were just trying to recover in our main markets of, well, every market besides Korea was having struggles. And just recently in Japan, I think the chairman mentioned earlier, is that, we've been battling to get some of that lost flight service that we lost with, the loss of Delta totally exiting Guam, Saipan, and Palau. So that was a big loss to us. But we've been able to make some inroads with getting the second flight from Japan Airlines with United Airlines, bringing back the 777. Today, United just announced they're bringing back 4 more flights from Nagoya. So that's why part of the testimony is we're, in the recovery mode, especially in our main market of Japan, and to absorb this extra increase when, we're already kind of seen as an expensive destination compared to the competitors.
Right.
But maybe the question on the effects of the corporate tax to maybe some of the business members here, if they would share.
Let me add here, as a responsible business running the hotel, we don't just pick up all the profit and walk away. We put back the money into the hotel because that's the asset. We have to maintain the asset. Every year we put in money to improve the facility. So if you look at every hotel, every 5 years to every 8 years, we do entire renovation. If you look at other hotels, they are always improving their asset. So whatever we can set aside, we amortize and save the money to put back into the economy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Murnaga. Thank you, Mr. Jai. I'm asking because it's significant to be reduced from 34, 35, 38, or 39 to 21% tax. And I'm just wondering if some of that money savings could be used to cushion this if, it was the increase. I was curious if you have any details of what happened when in, I think, 1989, they increased the hotel occupancy tax from 10 to 13%, of what effect that had at that time?
A little bit before my time, but I do know in '93 it was decreased right from 13 to 10%, I think, after the earthquake and subsequent typhoons. And then after that, it went up, I think, in '95 by 1%. So I think to the industry's point, you talked about the tax cuts, but there was the increase in the BPT, right, which affects all the hotels as well as all the other tourism businesses. So 1%, 25% increase to the BPT, affecting all revenue that you take in, is a big increase. So I think that probably, they would say, offset some of the tax cut, and so, yeah, I think.
You don't have any info from 1989 then, when it went from 10 to 13?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then my last question is, in your testimony, you said there were some alternatives that we should look at, and I'm curious about this one. It says, replacing lost income tax revenues with similar income-based taxes. And could you please expand on that? What type of similar income-based taxes are you proposing?
So, ma'am, that direct verbiage came from our tourism economics, our economists that we shared that with. So I'll share that report with you. But I guess they were just saying other kinds of income-based taxes. So I know this body's been talking about things like the, delinking and making having our own local income taxes. So I think that's what they're talking more broad-based taxes. Because the bottom line is, if you increase the cost of goods, basic economies will say the higher something costs, the less volume we'll have. So any cost increase on a consumable item will lead to a decrease in the amount you sell, right? That's basic economy. So other broad-based taxes, such as property taxes or other income taxes.
No, but this is saying similar income-based taxes.
Yeah,
so
you're saying you cut the income taxes, so they're saying if there's other income taxes that could be replaced
right, I'm asking you what do you mean by, you're saying we should consider this as an alternative, similar income-based taxes, not property taxes or those kind of things, but similar income-based taxes. And do you mean to, like, put back the tax rate that Congress reduced?
Something like that. Putting back to the tax rate that it was before.
Does GVB have anything concrete that we could consider for this proposal?
Not really our place to, deliver tax structure for the island, but so this was just the economist is saying that compared to raising taxes such as a hot tax, which is effectively a value-added tax, which will affect the price of that item and then lead to lower sales. Something like a corporate tax or property tax, which is broad-based, will not have a bigger impact on the amount of people are spending. If people aren't going to buy less land if the property tax is 10% higher, because that's not really how it works in those kind of taxes.
Right.
People aren't going to work less if the corporate taxes are higher. Right? So I think that's what they're just trying to say.
Very generally, okay.
Just generally, yeah. Sorry.
All right, no problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Since we were touching upon that subject where the hotel occupancy tax was at a level of 13% at one time, what's your thoughts of, right now the proposal before us is 15%. What if we just reinstitute the 13%?
Is that
Anybody from GVB who wants to answer could answer.
And that's thank you, Senator. That's why I mentioned in the overall taxes, the hotels are paying both the occupancy tax and the BPT on every night stay. So effectively, right now, with the extra percentage point, everyone's paying 11 plus the 5%, so 16%. And so, it's kind of like we already raised the tax on the room night stay by that extra percentage, and if it goes up to 1.5%, you would be looking already at a 1.5 increase if the BPT moved up to that point. So to then raise it another 2 to 4 points, I think will make the rate somewhere, as I mentioned, as high as 20.5%. So on a 200-night.
So the question is, if we lowered the hotel occupancy tax by 2 percentage points, down from 15 to 13, what's your thoughts on that? Basically bringing it back in line to where it was back 15, 20 years ago.
20 years ago and now, the market is different. 20 years ago, we didn't have that much of competition. Okay, so the closest destination in the United States was Guam. So the Japanese were coming. If you look at our record, 20 years ago, the Japanese tourist was very high. Korea tourist was low, right? But now, if you bring that into 13, it doesn't matter if it's, right now is a price that people are accepting it on the tax-wise, the tourists. But the thing is, we have to improve the source right now. That's why we are working hard to bring the airlines to bring more air seat. And that will bring more tourists into Guam. Then we can recover. Then you're going to have another tax that you're going to have. If I don't have people coming here, it doesn't matter if it's 11, 13, or 10, or 9. I need to get people here. But just having from 11 to 13, the same effect, that will cause a problem for people with price-sensitive society right now. They have better choices to go a cheaper location. That's why we had a lot of argument in the sales tax and all that in the past. And again, middle of the year to change is very difficult for the tourism industry because we have a contract that's been signed for 1 year. That means even though if it's 11 to 13%, that 2% is out of pocket from the hotel owners, the hotel operation. It's not from the travel agent or from the tourists themselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, Senator, to your point, so we included the economic impact study here. So the economists found that the average price elasticity in tourism is around minus 1%, meaning every 1% increase in the price will cause a 1% fall in demand, all things equal. Guam is a little bit even more elastic because we're getting leisure visitors. So these are people just shopping between, families or people just traveling for leisure. So they're more likely to be more price sensitive as opposed to a business visitor, right? That's coming for business and the company's paying for it. So you can expect to see a 1%, roughly 1% decrease with a 1% increase in the price. So that'll be the effect to the increase of the 2%. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Tess Bruyere, Melissa Bautista, Kelly Park, Chris Choi, Veronica Flores, Evan Yamazaki, the only one. I tried to use all the names that I had a hotel. I don't.
Oh,
All right,
thank you.
fine. I guess you're the only one that wants
I
to talk.
know. I'm so special. Thank you. Half a day speaker and senator. My name is Tess Reyes Bourrier. I am representing our vice president and general manager of Lotte Hotel, and I am the F&B director. Half a day speaker B.J.F. Cruz. On behalf of Lotte Hotel Guam, I am here to express our strong and adamant opposition to Bill number 314-34, an act to increase the hotel occupancy tax on October 1st from 11% to 15%. Tourism is Guam's biggest industry. Clearly, the hospitality industry is a key contributor to the economy of Guam. In general, the tourism industry is thriving on Guam. We have seen increased visitor arrivals from a cross-section of the Asian demographic like never seen before. Korean arrivals have outpassed the traditional dominant Japanese visitors. We have seen a slow but steady increase from the China, Taiwan, Russia market. The numbers of arrivals are up. However, spending is down. This trend can only be explained by the increase of budget-conscious travelers who are more careful where they spend their money. Increasing the hotel occupancy tax from 11% to 15% is unprecedented and will have a dramatic adverse impact in the tourism and the hotel business on Guam. A typical traveler who is looking for a destination will look for something within their budget. Currently, they find Guam desirable and within their means. They can afford the rooms but have limited their tertiary spending. Now, imagine what an increase in lodging would mean. They will look towards other more desirable destinations. Currently, the 11% hotel occupancy tax is one of the highest in the U.S. Guam is the second only to the state of Connecticut, who boasts a 15% tax. Hawaii's hotel occupancy tax rate is 9.5%, significantly lower than Guam, and who will see many visitors from Japan. Currently, visitors and the potential visitors in our market survey find Guam as a relatively expensive destination when compared to other options. Lotte Hotel, as with other hotels, have bookings placed months and years in advance. It is with these bookings, expected trends, and stability of Guam's economy is how we project for our operations. An increase of the total cost of staying in the hotel room will result in reduction of number of hotel night stays, canceled reservations, and general downturn in projected arrivals. This trend also means lower visitor arrivals and less tourists buying products and paying for services. You can say that hotel occupancy and hotel industry is the front line of Guam's economy. High occupancy translates to more money being spent. As the GVB promotion says, tourism works. It will affect all of us. Globally, an increase of occupancy tax is in direct opposition of other destinations. We must explore our options that will stimulate growth and spending, and in turn would increase taxes collected. For example, Da Nang, Vietnam ranked as the top destination for the summer season among Korean travelers, offers beautiful beaches like Guam. However, the cost of travel is much lower. The Vietnamese government subsidizes its airlines to bring the cost of airfare down for visitors, while levying a mere 10% value-added tax on their low cost of goods and hotels. Japan, Singapore, Thailand, among others, waive sales taxes on foreign visitors in order to attract more visitors. For budget travelers, spending becomes justified when you get money back. Increased sales provides a correlated increase in GRT. The increase of low-cost carriers are expanding to other destinations like Hawaii. For Lotte Hotel, Guam is home. We want to make the best of our home and are willing to help any way we can. As a member of the hospitality industry and the family and Guam family, we have taken part on redevelopment of our area to ensure that we provide a safe environment to our family and visitors alike. Installation of additional street lights, installation of CCTV within the perimeter of the hotel to ensure the safety of our guests, providing sidewalks and crosswalks to our visitors so they can walk safely, across the street. Cleaning of trash and unsightly debris from hotel grounds and surrounding roadways and beaches, improving the landscape of the front of the hotel and the hotel itself. We understand the partnership between private and public to ensure that our island visitors will have a safe and everlasting memories on Guam. Protecting the tourism industry is not only an investment, but a commitment to ensure that we provide the only best of what we have to offer. With the increase of 4% occupancy tax in October 1st, question comes to mind. What would be the return on investment for the industry? Will the 4% increase ensure the safety of our visitors with a more visible police force? Will we see improvements in the infrastructure of water, power, sewer, and roadways? Will we see improvement of lighting and pedestrian crosswalks from the beach, bar, to Hilton? Or is the increase just to meet the appetite of the government work without any effort to reduce the waistline? We are in this together. We must show leadership and responsibility. Guam restaurants, whether in a hotel or standalone, is known for our buffet and good food. If we charge too much, no matter how good the food is, we'll lose business. Therefore, we must look at food costing, staffing, and other things that we can control to maintain the quality within the price that a customer will spend. This is done with well thought out actions, not with quick thought reactions. Mr. Speaker, Senators, tourism works for us. Can we please work for tourism and find a better way to make this work for us? I am confident, or we are confident, and look forward that the 15 senators in the 34th Guam legislature will come up with a better solution. Thank you. Signed by our Vice President and General Manager of Lotte Hotel.
Thank you. How long has the Lotte Hotel been here?
It's going to be 5 years.
And when you started, what was your weighted room rate?
Our room rate is actually
depending on 5 years ago.
I'm sorry?
What was it 5 years ago?
5 years ago, I wasn't there yet, but 5 years ago, I believe it's 185, depending on the season. There's also depending on, what we have.
And what is
in
it
the
now?
beginning, we don't have that much. In the beginning, it's like in June.
What is it now?
Now it's 190.
It's gone up
Depending-
$5 in 5 years?
Because we try to, because it's a new hotel, so we really try to make a better price for our tourists, especially with the Koreans coming in. So the different market. So the Korean market is very much conscious with the cost. We wanted to offer them a better price, because if we are going to compare to Korea, the price in Korea is higher because Lotte Hotel is known in Korea. So it's a different market.
And so over the 5 years, your hotel weighted room rate from 5 years has gone up all of $5?
Yes.
That's your testimony that you're sticking with
so,
today?
Sorry. So what happened is like it's moving up and down depending on the arrivals or the occupancy. Because like other hotels,
so what is the weighted room rate? The weighted room rate takes all that
The
into
weighted room rate is 185 to 190, depending on the type of room.
And
depending on the type of room.
And for the hotel, how much has it gone up in the last 5 years?
In the hotel, we usually have $5 because we are only starting, and we are actually actually focusing on how we can increase the tourism, the Korean market, because that's where our market is mostly Korean.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? If not, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Catherine Castro. Deanna Palmer. Steve Stolberg. Hitoshi Hiro. Sumi Kuba. Why don't, go ahead, Catherine. Ms. Castro.
Hafade, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present our comments on Bill number 314. In 2005, the Chamber Board issued a statement strongly opposing the legislature's then proposal to raise the hotel occupancy tax. The reasons the Chamber spoke out against the proposal 13 years ago remain the same today. Every single direct and indirect cost imposed on tourism has an equal and opposite detrimental impact on the health of this industry. Guam competes with other destinations to attract visitors to our island. Price points play a determining factor in whether travelers book a flight to Guam or Hawaii or Hong Kong. In its May 2018 preliminary arrival summary, GVB reported that although tourism numbers have continued to grow from Korea, visitors from Japan, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan have declined. Money spent on tax increases will not pay for needed recapitalization and upkeep of hotel properties, expansion of services and activities for visitors, hiring and training of staff, increasing salaries, and creating a return on equity that attracts capital investment. Hotels and comparable facilities need to provide highly valued experiences at a competitive price point. None of these goals can be attained without the government interfering in the role of free market. We should also point out that Guam does not only compete for leisure travels, but also for company-paid travels such as meetings and incentive trips. A mere increase in room tax can dissuade travel planners from booking rooms for large and small groups. Any large-scale increase in room rates will have an impact on hotel occupancy rates that will compel the reduction in hotel staff hours and hotel staff jobs. Since tourism is Guam's largest industry, it will have a monumental impact on working families already under stress from increased cost of living expenses. We all must realize the present status of the industry on Guam and how recent increases of fees plus the real cost of doing business on our island have impacted all hotel facilities and every business on Guam's bottom line. Every resident will be negatively affected by the proposed tax increase. As a community, focus must be on attracting a digital investment to Guam, encouraging entrepreneurial initiative among our own people, and supporting the role of free enterprise to grow our tax base. Continued tax increases will only discourage investment, stagnate growth, and force businesses to leave island or close its doors for good. Has this government conducted its due diligence in implementing cost savings measures on itself that every business on Guam has had to not only initiate but implement in recent years? Has this government reviewed its collection procedures and enforcement efforts regarding timely payments of current fees and taxes? Has this government utilized locked box funding sources for other expenses than what the fund was appropriated for? It is our view that the government of Guam stay out of locked box accounts conduct its work efficiently, review and eliminate non-critical positions and offices, and truly audit its program of work to live within its means. Lastly, we are not in favor of this bill's additional proposal to repeal the requirement for voter referenda on tax increases. We instead suggest that amendments be developed and implemented to prevent the circumvention of this particular mandate, which has unfortunately been the case since its enactment in 1998. We thank you for the opportunity to provide our statement in opposing Bill number 314, and we encourage you and the entire Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication to reconsider the passage of this bill. Members of the business community are happy to sit with you and a designated working group to look at the priorities suggested herein and to deliver on these ground-setting initiatives for our government. Thank you, sir.
Did you wish to read your testimony for 15?
Sir, you know, we have written testimony in the past, and it's basically a reiteration of what we have said in.
All right, thank you. Ms. Palmer?
Hi, good evening.
You need to turn.
Good evening. So I'm here just as myself, Deanna Palmer. I don't represent my company or the organization. I do appreciate the public hearings. I do appreciate the process. I want to encourage people to participate. So that's mostly why I'm here. I oppose both bills for different reasons. I'm really happy to be here because I've learned a lot about the people who have spoken, and so it's really interesting. I support the hotel industry opposition of the bill because I'm concerned about their employees. I see people who are trying to buy homes who are just barely able to make it, and when they don't get enough hours at work, they can't buy a home. So it's critical that people stay employed, that the hotel industry stays strong, that the hotel industry actually makes a profit and continues to grow. Because when they make a profit, they will pay more taxes. So let's encourage business growth and business profit for our hotel industry. Let's not increase their taxes and drive away potential future tourism. I learned that they have contracts that would be at risk because they have a set price. If you change the GRT or the hotel occupancy tax, it will in fact negatively affect their bottom line. They will be forced to reduce hours, to lay people off, and they're creative people. They will try to make new business to compensate because that's what they do. They know how to advertise and how to create more opportunities for themselves. Please don't tie their hands. On the increase to 5.5 on the GRT, I'm really disappointed that you folks continue to increase GRT. It's almost like for a small business person like myself, I start getting a handle on my expenses, and now you've increased my taxes again. So I don't approve, I don't support it. I also don't support the removal of the tax referendum section. I want people to be more active. We need to be more active. You need us to be more active. So please don't do away with that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stolberg.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't really have any prepared statement, but I do want to make a point that I talk about a couple times a month when we're in a new employee orientation at the hotel, and that no one really our customers don't need us. They want it. We're primarily a leisure market. People that come here really, they have so many choices, not just in Guam, but other destinations. And so we earn every guest that come in. And in these kind of times when it's more and more competitive, I mean, it's critical that we have every I dotted and T crossed to get this business. And I think, you know, the industry has done really well after what happened last year with North Korea and slowly rebuilding. And we want to keep it that way, but we don't ever want to take for granted what we have, because we have a good thing going here and it can get better, and we just want to be very careful with it. And that's really all I wanted to say. Is just one other thing though, we're talking about profitability in the past, and if you look at, I'm sure most of our profits have gone up in the last 5 years, but our margins really haven't improved at all. In fact, margins are really, we're struggling, everyone is struggling right now, especially with the new electricity costs. You know, where in the case of the outrigger, I mean, it's 50 or 60,000 a month more than it used to be a year ago. So, I mean, it's a huge difference. Okay?
And the testimony that was given by the chamber was that for every % increase, it has a negative % decrease for you. Have you noticed a drop in your occupancy as a result of these increased costs?
No, because I mean, unless we're passing them on, I think what they meant was if you pass the cost on. Isn't that what you meant?
Well, what was your weighted room rate 5 years ago?
I'm sorry?
What was the weighted room rate at the outrigger 5 years ago?
Probably, I wasn't here, but I would probably $160, $170 probably.
And what is it currently?
About 200.
And so that would be a 25% increase. Have you noticed a 25% decrease in your business?
No.
No?
No.
Ms. Castro, your testimony about the 1% increase with the resulting 1% decrease, what was the weighted room rate in 2004 when you guys opposed it?
I don't recall, sir, but I can look that up.
What was it 5 years ago?
I don't recall, sir.
You come and testify without
I'm
having
sorry.
those facts?
Yes.
But we
What's your position?
Mm-hmm.
What is your job title?
The president.
Of what?
The Guam Chamber of Commerce.
And you're here testifying without those facts before you, yet you testify that a 1% increase will result in a 1% decrease in occupancy. Do you have the facts for that?
Not in front of me, sir, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions of this panel?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank you for your testimony. I agree that people should be more active, and it's very helpful for us. But I'm just want to clarify, do either or any of you support continuation of the sales tax? Ms. Palmer?
My understanding of the sales tax, because you're adding 2%, but you're not changing the GRT, you've basically increased our taxes by 50%. I can't support that. It's too big of a jump. It's too much, too fast. And so they're just, again, the testimony that I've heard already is that there's some question about accountability and responsibility on the government side. And then me personally, which I forgot to mention, is like, we are in the midst of this military buildup where we're close to $1 billion in contracts that have been awarded. I have to pay GRT on everything that I make. So where is the construction GRT from this big buildup? Where's the 4 or 5% of those millions of dollars in contracts that have been awarded and paid? And we're going to have more coming. We should be floating in money right now. And we're not. So somebody either isn't paying it, they've got an exemption. I don't hear the answer to where that money is. And until I do, I can't feel comfortable increasing taxes, because that's a big amount of money that we don't have in our accounts.
The Guam Chamber has been on record of supporting a sales tax only with the as we support a sales tax, we do not have a BPT, a business privilege tax. So we are supporting the gradual increase and a gradual decrease at the same time.
Did you want to answer that question, Mr. Salzberg?
I really don't know how to answer it.
All right.
I don't have.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony.
Ms. Cabana? Mr. Nault? Yasuda, yes. Somebody from Kloppenburg? Eric Ichiloa? Please introduce yourself and read your testimony.
Honorable Speaker, and the rest of the senators, thank you for allowing me to be here today to testify. I'm testifying on the bill 314-34. It is my pleasure to testify in regards to this. My name is William Nault. I am the president of Notec Travel Services, which represents Rakuten Travel, a Japanese online agency with a local office here in Guam. My company manages and provides operation for local services for the online travel agency. For its ground services, such as promoting and selling of local tours and optional tours, shows, spas, introducing local shopping centers, as well as restaurants and rent-a-car services. We also help promote the transportation services as well. To be honest, it has been a tough year for all. Due to the declining travelers from Japan, many activity companies, shopping restaurants, etc., have expressed their concerns and worry. I also serve on the board of directors for the Guam Visitors Bureau. I do apologize that I did not come up on when you have asked for the GVB people to come up on the table because I wanted to have this opportunity to testify on a separate note. I have assumed the role of the chairmanship for the Japan Marketing Committee for the Guam Visitors Bureau effective of October of 2017. My immediate actions for the committee was to announce that the importance of Japan market was to increase the seat capacity from Japan and made it a mission for 2018. We have visited and had extensive meetings with Japan Airlines, United Airlines, Jeju Air, and T-Ways. We had made visits to Japanese LCCs, which are the local carriers, to see if there were any possibilities of any Japanese LCC to fly to Guam. In a few months, we managed to have Japan Airlines schedule a new flight effective March of this year, which increased the seat capacity by a little over 230 seats. We had expected to lose the seats of Delta Airlines. We continue to work with our existing partners. As United Airlines plans to decrease seats effective of April of 2018 was finalized shortly after the North Korean threat. We needed to show and prove that Guam was capable of working closely with our airline partners to create a strong working relationship. In a few months, Jeju Air made its announcement of flying daily flights from Kansai Airport effective July of 2018. Our travel agency partners have worked hard in chartering record-breaking charter flights out of Japan for the summer, and our hometown carrier has announced that their return of their 777 aircraft to service the Narita to Guam routes as of October of this year. United Airlines further announced that they will be returning their night flights from Kansai and Nagoya. T-Ways has also announced that they will be adding additional flights from Nagoya to Guam, and we just recently heard that there is another plan to add a daily charter from Narita to Guam in late December. Our partners have shown their trust in the destination, all have made tremendous responsible decisions in adding the extra flights to Guam. Japan Airlines has also announced that their extension of the double daily flights from Narita to further service Guam from October through March of 2019. Just when we have started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I feel that the extra added tax on the visitors will be seen as a negative tax hike and thus making our rebuilding of the market a harder task. Thank you. I humbly ask your support in the Bureau and the market by not pursuing further in raising the hotel occupancy tax, especially when our travel partners have already created their tour pamphlets for the months starting from October of 2018 through March of 2019. The travel partners will not be able to change the rates, in which the travel partners will have to absorb the cost of the increase. Mr. Speaker, I humbly wish to say that this is not the time to raise the occupancy tax. This is not the time to continue the efforts to bring back the tourists from Japan and make Guam a better place to work and live. Please continue to give us your support in working to further increase our opportunities with our travelers. And I thank you. Caesar's Master.
Thank you very much.
I just have one question, and
Yes.
You're welcome, Mr. Morinaga, to respond to. But what I've heard said by several of the people is that you're already locked in to, I guess, contractual agreements and whatnot for the rooms, and those were done at lower rates than it would be if the taxes were increased now. I'm just kind of find it difficult to believe that that there's no clause in those contracts that would allow you to adjust to changes in prices.
Senator, I do believe that there are clauses within agreements between hotels and travel agencies and so forth, and there may be, I am not sure, that there are clauses between the travel agency and the consumer. One thing before I answer your question is that the hotel occupancy taxes which are collected from the Japan market are not, mostly collected by the hotel from the consumer. They are actually collected by the travel agencies in Japan who sell the travel packages to Guam, which I would say that plays about good 70%, close to 70% of the travelers from Japan do come through package tours, and then the payments are made in Japan, and that the taxes also are collected in Japan, in which they are paid through their local offices or directly to the hotels, so that the hotels can collect on the tax to pay the revenue and tax. Now, the reason why it is hard for the travel agencies or hotels to raise the taxes is because, as it was mentioned earlier by other people, that Guam faces a tougher competition, the harder competitions from other destinations. And with that, we have been working hard with the airlines, because as we know that airlines were lessening their seats, pulling their aircraft out of the destination and so forth, and that finally the destination seems that the demand for the destinations was going up. Now, with that being said, the many travel partners, travel agencies and hotels who do market Guam for us in Japan and as well, see that any increases or coming back to say that there's going to be increases to the hotel occupancy basically is just another price jumps and so forth. There was a lot of questions asked about within the 5 years if your hotel rates have gone up and so forth, and that I do believe that the hotel rates have gone up within the last 5 years, but I would say that compared to maybe 14 years ago, the hotel rates have actually gone down, or maybe 50, I'm not sure. But after when we had our natural disasters with typhoons and, when the Typhoon Russ, Typhoon Omar, and so forth, and after the year 2000, the prices did go down to accommodate for the weakness in the market, and that finally after 2006 or 7, when things started to pick up, then the prices did start to go up. And then, but other than that, there was a comment made by a gentleman prior to me saying that he does not see any increases from, for the hotels besides utilities and so forth. I just felt that was not true, and the reason is because every little raise in something does raise the cost for a hotel or any other business. Like, for example, I know that for a fact that the minimum wage did go up, which does increase the cost for the hotels. Any utility charges that goes up will raise not just the hotels, but also for the supplies that the hotels buy, for food, for the rooms, for the bed sheets and so forth. And then also, I also understand that some of the hotels that have just testified, like Mr. Solberg, has said that his hotel room did go up, but then within the 5 years, I know that they have painted their hotels, that they have renovated their hotels, and they had actually put the money back into the hotel so that we can have a better product. Now, sorry, Senator, going back to your question in regards to the raising of the taxes, and there was no clauses. Yes, I am sure there's a clauses. It's just that when tour pamphlets and so forth have been printed, it's pretty hard to tell the consumer that, sorry, Guam raised their taxes, so now we're going to raise your tax. And then so what most likely would happen from my experience of over 30 years in this industry is that they will absorb the cost and for that raise. And so basically what I like to say is that the timing is not really good for this, and that if you were to ask me, so if we were to push this back a couple months back, then will it be okay? I would still say that it would not probably be looked upon as a positive thing. And the reason is because besides the fact of clauses and so forth, there are issues such as competition. And as I believe Mr. Morinaga had mentioned, that there are more competitions within the industry, I mean the destinations, and that there are a lot more competition, and they spend a lot more money than we do in order to promote their destinations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I call the government agencies, are there any others that want to come forward? Come up. I just didn't see your name on here. Anybody else before the government agencies? Please. You need to turn on the microphone.
Jeff Schweitzer. I'm chairman of the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, and Mary Tory Rhodes put together testimony for you today. She's going to read that testimony.
Hapaday and good evening, everybody. For those who don't know, not Mary Torres, but Mary Rhodes, that's okay. It just happened recently again. But I am Mary Rhodes, the president of the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association, and we want to thank you for the opportunity to provide input and insight to Bill 314-34, which is an act to increase the excise tax on occupancy of hotels and similar lodging house facilities by adding a new subsection 3 to section 30101 of Title 11 Guam Code Annotated. The people of Guam have seen several pieces of legislation introduced with revenue enhancement bills to address the perennial and predictable government of Guam's budget shortfall, exacerbated by the reduced tax liabilities and without long-term planning to address living within its means. As a leading tourism NGO, GHRA is focused on meeting its mission to advocate just legislation and work closely with our government leaders and agencies on laws as well as the regulations. Comprised of more than 300 members, GHRA represents the tourism industry, which accounts for 1.5 million visitors, generates $1.85 billion in annual revenues, contributes $260 million in taxes to the general fund, of which $45 million of that is directly hotel occupancy tax, and we employ 21,100 people, which is 34% of the population, equating to 1 in 3 jobs. So there are a couple of graphs that I've been including in a couple of my testimonies over the last 2 years, because I think it's very important to provide some of the data that the Guam Visitors Bureau does put out there, and I think it's important that we all have these reference points. So I know that there were some questions about corporate tax and other types of taxes, and so this is being reported in the economic study that they provide, and also in the tourism satellite study. Together with the Guam Visitors Bureau, GHRA opposes Bill number 314-34. Increasing the hotel occupancy tax from 11% to 15% would be detrimental to Guam's tourism industry because it further decreases our competitiveness to source markets and targets only one industry. Before considering any increases to taxes, GHRA strongly feels the government needs to have a balanced approach, and we've been saying this with other bills that have been introduced the last several months, but we want a balanced approach and focus on implementing cost containment and savings measures, collecting outstanding tax revenues, enforcing existing laws that generate new revenue streams, like we've been talking about this evening with short-term vacation rentals like Airbnb, and looking at other broad-based taxes like property taxes. Any increase in the hotel occupancy tax will be counterproductive and result in decrease in arrivals, also a loss in jobs, lower on-island spending that has already been decreasing over time, and an overall negative impact to Guam's largest industry. Also, hotels have contracts, as stated earlier this evening as well, with wholesalers, which could be for 1 year, but are often negotiated 7 months in advance of the effective date. Most contracts are indeed signed during their fiscal period starting April 1st and ending March 30th. All contracts include applicable taxes, as Mr. Nault had said earlier, and so prices are set for a specific period and cannot be changed arbitrarily. It is important to preface our desire for a balanced approach with the many proposals to increase taxes with what is happening in our economy as well as our market. 2017 was a seismic shift for the tourism industry in that the island lost its major source market of the past 50 years. This comes immediately after the downturn that was quite evident in prior years, as reported by GBB's satellite account. It's a survey that provides performance indicators for the tourism industry every 5 years, and as I understand it, they're committed to producing this every year. In 2016, it was already reported that Japan was down by 80%, negative 80%, less than a decade ago, and I did provide those slides for you for the Japanese markets. In 2017, Guam as a destination for Japan further lost its core competitive advantage of accessibility and affordability with the exit of Delta and the reduction of capacity by United, where routes have been discontinued. And I know that we have been talking about, some of the recent announcements of what Japan Airlines is doing as well as United Airlines, but you have to understand the reasons why these things are happening. It's not just that they can add seat capacity all of a sudden. Those things need time to build, but it's also those routes were discontinued, and what really happened were rate increases took place and we had a decrease in volume, which really both negatively affect us. The airlines actually reacted very slowly to lower pricing, and travelers chose more attractive and better priced destinations. Specifically, airfare to Hawaii and Asia is substantially cheaper than flying to Guam. As competition on pricing gutted the Japan load factors for the airlines, they began cutting flights. Japan arrivals were down negative 16.8% for 2017, and the last quarter was at minus 29.6%. To further exacerbate the problem, Guam was already again directly impacted by the North Korea crisis. This was paramount in our further decline in arrivals, which spurred some aggressive pricing strategies within hotels by lowering their rates to become more competitive. Even though we see growth within hotels, even though we see growth in arrivals, Guam has been continuously decreasing its market share in total outbound travel, as well as experiencing a decline in total on-island spending. Guam saw decreases in arrivals in every source market, which I know that President Knight mentioned, except for South Korea. Arrivals finished flat last year at 0.3% growth for the year. Although it is true that GVB continues to report record-breaking arrivals and increases in revenue and taxes, the fact remains that the industry is struggling despite these numbers. The island needs to be very concerned, as it is not just volume that makes an industry prosper, it's also the pricing and the competitiveness of where you compete within the region. It's true that the burgeoning Korean arrivals in 2017 added volume, but they did not add yield. The industry continues to be challenged with large variances between core source markets and its consumers in total spending. The following is a 10-year review, at least a 10-year review, of the exit survey results for Japan and in Korea, which really illustrate this. And I've attached, actually I'm gonna supply you with a copy of the aggregated research reports for both 2017, which gives you this full 10-year review for Japan and Korea. But I really wanted to highlight the slide which has on-island spending. For Japan in 2006, this is on a per person mean expenditure on average for both on-island as well as prepaid. Back then in 2006, prepaid packages for just a person, not the whole family traveling, but just a person on average was $662.04. It is up to $853.76, which really reflects what we're talking about in us really losing our market share in outbound travel because we're becoming more expensive as a destination. That is a 28.9% increase over the last 10 years, or 11 years. For on-island spending, although we always have said that our Japanese visitors spend more money than Korean visitors, that is true, and that Chinese visitors and Russian visitors spend a lot more than Japanese, you will see that the spend in 2006 was $606.21. Today, it is down by 24.4% at $438.57 for a Japanese visitor on average per person. For Korea, and this is in comparison to Japan, the on-island spend between a Japanese customer and a Korean customer for 2017 is a 13% differential. For Korea, 2007, the average on-island spend was $506.58, and it is now $382.70. That's a decrease of 24.4% in 10 years. Whereas the packages, so it's the opposite when it comes to airline and packages with hotels. Whereas Japan has gone up because of our losing our competitive nature within that market, we are becoming a discounted market for Korean, especially because of the introduction of low-cost carriers. We used to get $983.55 in 2007. We now get $788.49 on a per-person mean expenditure. That's a decrease of 19.8%. So yes, we can tout great visitor arrivals. This year, we're probably going to be at 750,000 just for Korean visitors. But we are getting less on what we used to get for our Korean visitors, as well as our Japanese visitors. Our climate's changing, everybody. And we cannot compare 1989, when we were at the 13%, or compare in 2005, when we were considering again the 13%. It's a totally different climate. It's a totally set of different competitive sets in how we compete within Southeast Asia. We can't even compete with Hawaii now. And we used to be able to be at least shorter, closer, cheaper. And we're not even able to say that. What I didn't provide you, which I have, and I will email it out to everybody and make it available. I know that there were a lot of questions on the on-island spend and Korea. I'm sorry, on the on-island spend, but also the hotel occupancy and the hotel room rate. And I know, Speaker, you were asking pretty much every hotelier what their weighted room rate was 5 years ago. Back in 2012, 6 years ago, yes, the weighted room rate was $123 on average. And now I'm just reminding you, when I speak to GHRA, I'm only speaking to our 28 member hotels. I'm not speaking to all of the other hotels that are not members of GHRA or the motels and the smaller lodges here. And especially not the short-term vacation rentals who should be paying taxes. Our weighted room rate was $123. It increased in 2013 to $134 and up to $149, $159, $166, and today it is at $168 weighted average for 2017. The true story in all of this is, although the room rates have gone up, so have costs, all of our utility rates. We've also had increase in labor, way more regulations as an industry than we've ever seen before, and a lot more certifications for every employee on the job. So a lot of those changes have also taken place in these years where we have to make up those costs. But the other really important economic indicator is hotel occupancy. And this is why we have been here time after time asking this body, and we appreciate Vice Speaker's bill to allow revenue tax to move forward without promulgating rules and regs on short-term vacation rentals, which is separate from B&B. Because what we have seen, although rates have gone up and total room nights sold have been there, hotel occupancy has gone from where the rate was only $123, occupancy back then was 81% on average year-round. We have seen it gone down to 75%, go up a little bit to 76, 78. For 2017, we were at 65%. And that is what we just saw this last month. Even in a busy month in March, where you would normally think it's a peak period like February, we started seeing numbers go down again because of seat capacity, and also because we continue to lose room nights. We may have all of this capacity, and I know that there's always been a question about we don't have enough hotels, we don't have enough rooms. Well, we do. We don't fill our rooms all year long, and we don't have back-to-back every night. We only have peak periods like February, and during these months coming up in August, September, and through the holidays in December and January. Those are our peak periods. When you think about it, 7 months out of the year, we're not in peak. That is why our average weighted hotel occupancy is 65% today. We are losing a lot to the short-term vacation rentals. And you know, that's okay as a competitive market because we know a lot of people are gonna be coming, whether it's Department of Defense and business people and more military exercises, and we really look forward to getting more of our Japanese visitors back to Guam. That is great. But where we're really losing, and the difference that you've seen these years, where we have lost 16% in hotel occupancy tax, is your answer, Senator Torres, with regards to the short-term vacation rentals. And we really implore this legislative body and Department of Revenue and Taxation to move forward and start enforcing that law, because that is a lost revenue, not just in hotel occupancy tax, but also in business privilege tax and everything else that is required of that business to operate, and not to also discount the safety and the success of our industry. So continuing forward, as Guam continues to become less competitive with pricing strategies in the market within Asia, Hawaii, and even Okinawa, it continues to have its limitations and challenges as a destination because of its Southeast Asia counterparts that have less expensive airfare, also less expensive labor, and more goods and services available to them. In 2018, the year-to-date in June for overall arrivals is still minus 3.1%, regardless of our arrivals that we keep reporting every month. Japan volume continues to drop by negative 20.9%, with Taiwan at negative 26.7%. Forecasts continue to be weak in 2018. And hotels, in response, have deeply discounted rooms. This is the first time I have seen RevPAR, or ADR, where it has been increasing, even with the increase in room rates, going from $122.87 in RevPAR, and even going as high as $158.42. We are trending right now, because of the discounted room rates within GHRA, to be down to $102.96 for RevPAR. That is where we're at today, because we are discounting so much just so we can get visitors back to Guam. So the business community and GVB have been working on various strategies to increase its positioning with charter flights with Japan this summer, which has then in turn caused Japan Airlines and United Airlines to now respond with additional flights to Guam, because there have been charters announced for the summer. They have offered deeply discounted rates to support the agents responsible for packages to Guam. We cannot afford to increase costs as Japanese outbound travel continues to go elsewhere and Guam continues to lose its market share. As the Korean market continues to surge, which it has, yes, the increase in overall arrivals do not mean we need to further tax the market. Growth requires additional investments to develop the destination, improve our product and service offerings, update infrastructure and our facilities, as a lot of people have mentioned, identify new sources of revenue, like meetings, incentives, conference and exhibitions, which are known as MICE. And we have a unique opportunity with all of the military coming and I know that there's been talk about educational tourism as well, with social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal, which is the SMERF market. That will help further diversify and expand our core markets and reinvest the Tourism Attraction Fund. I can't stress this enough more. We are here for an increase in hotel occupancy tax, but it is really only intended to fund the government's operational deficits and shortfalls. We're really not talking about reinvesting those dollars to grow tourism here. We are really only talking about helping the government of Guam continue status quo. Whenever we talk hotel occupancy tax, it really should be to benefit and to invest back into our tourism industry, not anything else. According to GVB and Tourism Economics, the hotels have a price elasticity of minus 1%, which President DeKnight did mention earlier, which means that any 1% in increase will further decrease demand. Bill 314-34 looks to increase it from 11 to 15%, which is a 36% increase. The Guam legislature's budget calls for an expected increase in BPT from 5 to 5.5%. Should you approve this bill, the combined increase of hotel occupancy tax and business privilege tax will take taxes from 16% to 20.5%. According to Fortune magazine, 22 states in the United States of America has a levy that is specific statewide tax on lodging, ranging from 3% to 13%. That is in the United States, 3% to 13% for a night stay at a hotel or motel. Specifically, Hawaii has a lodging rate of 10.25% plus a general excise tax of 4%, which is a total of 14.25%. Guam is already at 16%, more expensive than Hawaii, already.
Does Hawaii have a resort tax on top of that?
I'm sorry?
The resort tax in Hawaii?
Yep. Yes, it's called the lodging tax rate, and it is 10.25%. It used to be 9.25.
That's not separate from the lodging tax?
That is the lodging tax, 10.25%. And then the general excise tax is 4%. So that is at 14.25%, which Guam is still higher with 16 today. We cannot afford 20.5%, ladies and gentlemen. It will take the average daily rate of what we today already is high for our competitive set at $207.75 per night, and it'll increase it overnight 36% to $250.34 per room night. So that could easily result in, and I know some testimonies were like, well, why don't we just do that because, you know, it's not on us as a consumer, but the tourists travel anyway, so why not just do that? Well, they may choose to come to Guam, yes, but they will shorten their stay, they will stay in a cheaper room, they will lower on-island spending, which already is in the double digits compared to where we were 10 years ago, and it'll ultimately change destinations because when a tourist finds out that what they packaged originally before they come to Guam, especially leisure travelers plan ahead, and they find out that this changes, they can easily change out. And sometimes the cancellation dates could be 14 days out, where they don't have to lose their money. And they also have insurance coverage for travel. So if we make this decision, a lot of our leisure travelers will take their money elsewhere because it is becoming even more expensive than it already is. So GBB recently conducted an economic impact study to Guam's tourism of tax increases with tourism economics. I'm only going to say the 3 areas that I know was currently or in their testimony, but I think it's really important that we all hear this. Should you move forward with this, and I said for a full copy, obviously GBB's provided that. Some of the key findings included, I chose only top 3. A combined increase to hotel occupancy tax and business privilege tax could cause Guam to lose approximately $201.1 to $525 or $1 million in visitor spending over the first 5 years of implementation. That's going to be lost revenue. This represents a loss of 2.9% to 7.5% of visitor spending on a stabilized year basis. The loss of visitor spending will lead to a decrease of $40.3 million to $105 million of total wages and salaries for local residents because if we lose visitors and we have lower spending, then there's lower revenues at the hotels, and we will have to adjust to those changes. On average, the study states 200 to 523 fewer jobs will be supported in the economy. Due to decreased visitor spending, Guam's estimated to realize a loss of $23.4 million and $59.1 million of tax revenues over the first 5 years. That is what we mean by this bill being counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. GHRA understands the adverse impacts that furloughs or reductions in force or in hours has on the economy, but also in the government. No one ever wants to make these operational changes and personnel cuts to address the budget shortfall and deficit. The harsh reality is that we all have to adjust, and not just the government at Guam are experiencing cutbacks and changes in revenues and jobs and income. The private sector specifically have been making these difficult decisions, but these are necessary changes due to the business climate. GHRA remains steadfast in its belief that the legislature should be creating laws to help grow our economy instead of suppressing it or inhibiting growth by increasing the cost of doing business through increased taxes, fees, wages, and more government regulations. It's our goal to continue to work with the government of Guam on a plan of action, and I think we've said this at this table many times in wanting to work together with you to find ways that are beneficial to all concerned and provides a balanced approach to the government's financial challenges. With all of our provided testimonies, I continue to ask our elected leaders about the outstanding collections in account receivables at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We have a serious problem with the administration, collection, and enforcement of taxes, and we need to address that within the government. Our inability to collect our existing taxes and any new taxes, the people of Guam cannot continue to bear the burden of our government's inability to manage its finances. So last week, we did conduct a survey on the impact of these proposed tax increases. And this was much better than the last time we did it when we were considering sales tax as well as the BPT going to 5% temporarily. We did get an 11.6%, and that was only as of today. We're going to continue to hold it so we can get more responses. But those who are in favor of increasing the hotel occupancy tax to 15% was only 3 out of 35 responses, and that's only at 8.6%. Majority of our members, 91.4% of our membership who responded said no to the increase to 15%. To the question of, are you in favor of increasing BPT to 5.5%? None of our members agreed to the 5.5% BPT. They all disagreed and voted no. Are you in favor of keeping business privilege tax at 4%? 31 members responded at 88.6% to yes, and 11.4 responded to no, they don't agree with 4%. Do you believe that the increasing taxes will solve the government of Guam's operational deficit and budget shortfall? 97.1% said no. 2.9% said yes. Do you believe that the government of Guam will effectively implement, enforce, and collect all new and current taxes? 74.3% said no, 8.6% said yes, and 17.1% said no opinion. Now, these are also changes that could take place with any of these proposed tax increases, whether it's BPT or hotel occupancy tax. 85.7% of members said they will increase cost of goods and services, especially with BPT. 60% will limit expansion or capital improvements. 48.6% said they will reduce hours for full-time employees. 60% will reduce hours for part-time employees. 42.9% will implement layoffs or reduction in force. 60% will freeze any new hires. 22.9% will reduce wages. 42.9% will limit training opportunities. And 77.1% said they will limit wage increases. 40% said they will both replace jobs with advanced technology and also reduce health insurance benefits. 25% said they will terminate health insurance benefits. 28.6% said they will reduce retirement plan offerings, and 14.3% will terminate retirement plan offerings. 37% said they will eliminate other benefits. You have to remember that's one of the things, and I know we always talk about wage, but there are a lot of fringe benefits employees in the tourism industry get. And, you know, those are all their meals, their uniforms, laundry, a lot of other things, even carpooling. There are a lot of things that our industry, especially in the service industry, provides for our employees because of the task that they're given and because the rates are actually competitive within the industry. We pay according to what those wages are set by the market. We understand the government has its challenges, but as we have testified on before on various other bills, The government needs to take a thoughtful and balanced approach on these issues. They need to establish changes to Guam's tax system, and I think I really stressed this last time. We should be looking at our tax system with more detailed, analytical, and thorough approach that's supported by sound economic data, analysis, and studies. Not only do we need to allow businesses and not just businesses, but also our consumers, time to adjust to any tax change, we also need to have the government agencies supported and held, and I really mean supported. For example, we all know that there are recent increase in activity with Department of Public Health and Social Services, and they considered changing their fees a couple years ago. But they pulled that back because they said, you know what, we have a budget here, we will hire those people, and you know what, public health has gone and trained the amount of people necessary to go out and do their job. And that is why you've seen some really big changes with public health in going out and doing the citations, checking restaurants and hotels and other businesses, mom and pop stores, for all of their all the things that public health needs to look at, and they even have a new lab, and they're doing health certificates and all of that. We really need to support Department of Revenue and Taxation. We've said this time and time again. We are bleeding. We need to give them the necessary resources. I know personally, not only have we lost Senator San Augustine here because he was part of the ABC compliance side, I do know personally that a couple of them are retiring. You know how many people are in that department? 4. They will be losing half soon. And they're looking to transfer some, but they really need the assistance to go out and collect. You have to be mindful that ABC Compliance Department is not just responsible for the licenses and checking on the bars and closures and things like that. They are also your compliance officers for short-term vacation rentals and bed and breakfast and other areas that Rev and Tax needs to go out and check for compliance. So they have a big task at hand, and we need to support them to get the job done. So we need to support those agencies, but still hold them accountable to do their due diligence for collections before we make any changes to our existing tax systems. An increase in hotel occupancy tax will have the reverse effect the Guam legislature intends here, leading to decreased tax revenue in the general fund with lower arrivals, lower on-island spending, and lower jobs. Thank you for the opportunity, Sidzuis Masi, for having the opportunity to continue to work with each of you. We truly hope the legislative and executive branches do their part. Short-term reactions to issues drive divisions and not solutions. The business community has been dealing with these issues for more than a year recently and making strides to contain expenses, looking for more efficiencies, and developing new strategies to effectively manage in our very new environment. Is it not appropriate to ask our government to do the same? The government of Guam must make concerted efforts to contain costs, be diligent in collecting due taxes, and identify new sources of revenues. Sidzuis Masi.
Thank you very much. Anybody have questions? Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Rhodes, can you just clarify a statement? You stated that the industry is struggling. Can you qualify that a bit? How long has this been going on? Is it directly due to the missile crisis that we were facing, or are there other factors?
So as I stated in page 2, we have seen the decline in our Japan market for like 4 to 5 years. It was clearly stated in 2016, we've had a loss of 80% in the market. I think that, Mr. Steve Solberg is the general manager for Outrigger Guam Resort, but he's also our vice chairman, first vice chairman for GHRA. And although you may all think that there are a lot of profits out there, he has mentioned that we have smaller margins. Those margins are because the costs have increased year over year over year. And as I mentioned, it's not just costs in utilities, it's cost in regulations, additional citations, not just for the businesses, But mind you, for every employee, they have additional costs, each associated with them. So when you ask us if we're making a lot of money in this industry, it may seem like a lot of money, just like it may seem like Guam has a lot in tax revenue. And as Ms. Palmer said earlier, it seems like we have a lot of new incoming revenue. But why are we still in the situation we're at? We have smaller margins because we just don't make that much as you'd like to think. The reality is very difficult, and especially when you see continued negative numbers month after month after month and year after year, what do you expect? We just got back up to 1.5 million visitors recently. I don't know if you guys remember, we were down 1.3 and 1.2 just a couple of years ago. So the North Korea missile is just the recent thing that's happened.
Thank you, thank you. And I just kind of wanted to clarify and make sure that we have a time frame, because you made that statement and I followed along. A lot of it is very relevant data, but I'm trying to balance that out with what you're saying, that the industry's struggling, but then the reality that, I mean, as a business person, I mean, maybe I don't understand the industry at all, but when you see 3 new hotels popping up with an investment of millions of dollars in investment, typically you don't invest in a bad market, or a market that doesn't have the potential growth, or doesn't have potential growth, or it's not on the up and up. And I'm just trying to qualify the statement you made that the margins are low, that there's not really any profit there, yet we see hotels coming to try to capitalize on the market. And I'm just trying to put the two together. Maybe you can clarify, or somebody else can clarify how that works, because most business people don't invest in bad markets or bad business ventures. And so I'm trying to see if there's not a lot of money there, then where do they plan to capitalize on their market? Or where do they plan to even break even or recover the costs that they're putting into these hotels? And I'm just, again, I'm not, there's a lot of good information here, but it's just not at this moment, that aspect of it, that there's not a lot of margins in there, or that the margins are razor thin, is not just passing my common sense test right now. No offense to the testimony you put out, maybe you can explain how that works.
Well, I think I clearly explained a lot of it, but I have to say, GVB and GITA, they have been going out quite aggressively to go, and even the governor, to go out to, there's a hotel investors conference that they go out to every year, and in Hong Kong, and it is part of the Tourism 2020 plan to grow hotels. So although the margins, and you have to remember, they've gotten smaller over the years, they've been aggressively going after new hotels for 5-8 years. So this is not a new thing.
It's not a capacity issue then, because the numbers are down, right? Occupancy is down. So why are we increasing occupancy?
Let me see if I can help out. Okay. So you're watching a fundamental shift in our market from last year.
Quantity over. So if they're not spending as much, you're going for volume. No, I get that.
Right. No. Well, no. The whole infrastructure of the island is built around the Japan market. Right. So a lot of how margins are put together are not from one item. It's from 3 or 4 different items. Right. You have food. You have rentals. There are all different things that are involved in there. So a lot of what happens as Japan market falls, the equation changes, right, in terms of the yield. And again, most of us as businessmen, right, businesswomen, we make adjustments in those items, right? Okay, but that flow that was there has changed very dramatically, and that's changed margins quite dramatically. And the thing is also we're not unlike you, right? The more money we make, often the more money we spend, right? Because I want to create a better product, so I offer this new value of service and stuff. So every year you make, I don't know if for me, you know, when I was a busboy in this industry, I was broke, right? And when I moved up to a waiter, I was broke. And when I moved up into management, I was broke, right? And so it wasn't really a money problem as much as it is a spending problem. But also in a hotel, there are things you can offer. You're making more, you're doing better, you can improve this over here, you can add to the benefit package, you can, right? You want to offer better products, you want to increase the buffet spread. So you do different things. It's just not, it just all doesn't come down to the bottom line.
I want to add that we need to be careful that we try to oversimplify so much here when we talk about, oh, it's just an increase, or why do they invest if the margins are small? It wasn't always like that. It's becoming more challenging, and that's why we're saying the market conditions, which are the same reason why our wise speaker, Senator B.J. Cruz, did not move forward with the wage increase. The market conditions cannot support additional changes like that. We are so sensitive, price sensitive in this market, and there are a lot of challenges. So yes, there may be investments, but I can tell you, our counterparts in Asia, they grow by, I mean, I just came back from Macau. It's called International, and the kinds of investments being made there, leaps and bounds. You may be surprised with 1 hotel, 3 hotels. Look how long it's taken us. Do you know when the last hotel that was built, or maybe last investment was? Pleasure Island before that. We're not growing by leaps and bounds. So don't be surprised when 1 or 2 hotels look to invest. And by the way, only 1 is in construction, and it's being challenged. It's being stifled because of our H-2B problem and because Guam is an expensive destination to do business in. Those other hotels that are promised that maybe bought land because a broker bought it, there are no management contracts signed for new hotels to be constructed.
I was referring to the 2 recent hotels completed, both the Lotte and Dusit.
But those aren't new hotels, that's existing capacity.
I understand, but that's why I was asking you within the time frame of, you know, how long has the market been struggling? So if we've been seeing over 5 years a decline in occupancy, which means at the current capacity we have in Pleasure Island, or, you know, even if you include the bed and breakfast and other stays, if we have that capacity and that capacity is dropping because of a decline in the visitor market, why are we increasing capacity? And we can maybe talk.
Actually, we're not declining in arrivals. That's growing. We're declining in occupancy because there is more competition with short-term vacation rentals. They're just not going to the hotels as much as they used to.
Right. And I just wanted to bring that point up. I'm sure there's more to it. Again, I'm not attempting to oversimplify it. I just wanted to bring up that point because it did strike me. And I'm willing to discuss it further and get more information. And
Yep.
I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you for the testimony.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions of these 2? Thank you. Macho, Mr. Burns, Mr. Ariola, Mr. Carlson. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker and members of the 34th Guam Legislature. My name is Lester Carlson. I'm the Deputy Director at the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, here today to testify in support of both Bill 314 and Bill 315. We already have gone on about what Bill 314 does with respect to the increase in the hotel occupancy tax. I would like to make a comment, though, that the bill as written does not identify that the funding is going to go specifically to augment any general fund expenses, and that the body might consider, if it goes forward with this measure, to strengthen the language to be able to allow for the earmarking of these funds should this measure pass. Similarly, we are also here in support of Bill 315. We have gone ad nauseum with this body over the last 6-7 months about the budget shortfall in 2018. And I'd like to take a moment to remind the public that while I heard a lot of discussion about the government not doing its part to cut costs, that we in fact did cut costs, and we are continuing to cut costs. And I find it a little disturbing when the media reports stories or isolated incidents about hiring, yet when we cut the budget by $31.5 million, it was to give each department or entity a reduced authorization, or in cases of cash disbursements, a modified cash disbursement schedule to effectuate and realize a reduced government operational footprint this year. And I'm still bewildered why that point is not accepted by either the media or the people that testified prior to us coming up here. We did do something, and I really wish that when credit is deserved in some small fashion, that every once in a while you get an attaboy instead of bend over and kick you. It's disconcerting. I love the tourism industry, but we've coddled that industry. We've given them qualifying certificates. We went out and got bonds to be able to repave Tumon and help put lights up. Mr. Speaker, you basically helped us tremendously with getting the funding for the museum. We've taken upon ourselves to be able to improve the tourism product as a community. And I find it very disconcerting that it's my pie and don't touch my pie. When I first began working at the legislature in 2006 for the late Senator Tony Ampinco, I found out very quickly that any government revenue is appropriatable. You guys can say that any monies that are made off of hotel occupancy taxes can be utilized to fund gain or pave roads or whatever you feel is appropriate. Just because it says Tourist Attraction Fund doesn't mean that this body or there are needs outside of the visitor industry that can't be funded. So there's this, I heard on several occasions where it's like irresponsible.
Stick to the testimony, please.
Okay, sorry. Sir, I had to, I've been sitting here for a while. It's kind of hard to take.
I understand, and so have we. So please, just
anyways,
read your testimony into the record.
support the measures. We acknowledge that the Speaker stuck his neck out to do this. It's not a popular thing. We are not dead set on what it is that's being proposed here because, quite frankly, there was, several other revenue enhancement ideas that we've been talking about since February. Now, I know it's not easy. It's a difficult choice, but the realization is that we do need to do something. And we also recognize that austerity measures need to be part and parcel of what this legislature passes as far as the 2019 budget. So the other thing related, and I'll close with this, is that we're very happy to see that in Bill 323, there was additional funding that is being proffered for the Guam Memorial Hospital. The combination of increases in the lifting of restrictions on the use of the pharmaceutical fund, increases in the Healthy Futures Fund, and increases in the general fund.
We're on 314 and 315.
I know, sir.
Please.
You know, sir, with all due respect, there were time limits that were extended to everybody.
No, it's not that. It's just, it's 314 and 315.
Yes.
On Thursday night, we'll deal with 323.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Burns or Mr. Ariola, which one's speaking for the Department of Administration? Mr. Burns.
May I, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker and Senators, my name is Edward Byrne, Director of Department of Administration. Department of Administration is responsible for recording, processing, and reporting every dollar that represents revenues of the government of Guam, and every dollar that needs to be paid either to government Guam employees or vendors. In that respect, it is no different from any of the other businesses you've heard about tonight. The real difference is that the services which the government offers, the services which taxpayers expect and count upon, can only be provided by the government unless there is an outside provider willing to step in and taxpayers consent to the cost and consequence of the transfer of service to the private sector. At this time, there are no willing alternative providers of government services, so the burden falls on the government. Bills 314 and 315 are designed, taken together, to compensate for some of the income no longer collectible by the government because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. A policy decision of the federal government capable of being financed by the federal government through deficit spending, but has impacted the finances of the government of Guam. The responsible reaction to that reality is both to increase revenues and reduce expenses. The government has plans to do both of these. It has not attempted to increase the tax burden, only to recapture the income now happily retained by taxpayers in take-home pay. Spending reductions have been proposed and implemented. Deeper reductions will lead to reduced service levels for both taxpayers and for tourists. Agency directors look every day for ways to save money so that their resources are used in the most effective ways. However, income in fiscal 2019 is estimated to fall short of the original forecast by $145 million. To reduce expenses by that amount must impact service levels, and the impact will begin in October, and it will be severe. Nearly 80% of GovGuam costs relate to personnel. Savings of this magnitude cannot be realized without significant reductions in personnel, and that will immediately adversely impact the economy of Guam. I hate paying taxes, but I love the civilization they give me. A quotation from Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. 70% of government expenditures are for public safety, health, and education, with only 8% for debt service. It would be mathematically impossible to reduce expenses by $145 million without reducing the levels of service for these three priorities. You might even think that civilization will have to step back. The quality of our lives might suffer. Tourists might choose other destinations. Bills 314 and 315 are estimated to raise $14.6 million and $9.2 million respectively. This totals just under $104 million, a shortfall of about $41 million against previously available income tax revenues. $41.2 million is just over 6% of general fund revenues. Any such savings have to be achieved within the current framework of legal and administrative requirements. $145 million, however, The cash shortfall, if these bills are not enacted into law, is 21.6% of general fund revenues. Wholesale and far-reaching changes will be required to roll back some of the requirements of GovGuam's operating processes to match this much higher shortfall. Accordingly, Department of Administration can align with these bills as they make a significant and needed support to revenues lost to income tax reforms, assuming the proceeds of these tax changes flow through to the general fund. In the notes to our financial statement is the following fact. This fund, meaning the general fund, is the primary operating fund of GovGuam. It is used to account for all governmental transactions except those required to be accounted for in another fund. Senators, please allow this fund the financial resources which it needs to fulfill its mandate. It should be noted, however, as currently drafted, with these bills, there is no continuing funding source for GMH and DOE. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come before you, and should you have any questions about this testimony, please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ariella, were you going to, no? Mr. Camacho?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker and members of the Guam Legislature. My name is John Camacho. I'm the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We thank you for providing this opportunity to comment on Bills 314-34 and Bill number 315-34. As you know, the sales tax law is still intact, and basically in the event that it is overwritten, DRT really supports these two bills for the following reasons. Increased tax revenue would address unavoidable shortfalls resulting from the passage of the significantly lower deposits of income tax for individual corporate tax for the last few months. Based on the premises stated above, the government of Guam without proper funding would negatively impact the safety, health, and education that's priority for all. And lastly, as you mentioned several times on the revenue shortage, that BBMR and OFB projected anywhere between $120 to $145 million, excluding other factors such as the war reparations and Section 30 advance estimate. As public servants, we must act upon all variables that would be detrimental to sustaining critical service to the people of Guam. And glad to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much. Were you going to add anything further? Okay. I think you've sat through most of the testimony and you've heard that really your department was the butt of most of the criticism for its failure to collect. Most recently in the news, there was the story of the $14.3 million. Is that gross receipts business privilege tax, or is that tobacco, alcohol?
Basically, it's part of the BPT, so it's basically a tobacco tax.
It is a tobacco tax?
Yes.
What was the statute of limitations? You only went back, there was only admission for a 3-year period. Was there any reason why it was only a 3-year period? Was there any taxes due before that?
Basically, you know, I can't talk more into these things, but as far as our responsibility, when a tax is due, basically, normally, if we have anything above $25,000, it's our responsibility to file liens and protect the government's interest on these taxes.
Under Section 101.8 on limitation of right to inspection, there is it says, except for provided in 10109 of this chapter, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to require disclosure of records that are any of the following, and then it goes down to D, information required from any taxpayer in connection with the collection of taxes that is received in confidence and the disclosure of the information would to other persons result in unfair competitive disadvantage to the person supplying the information, except that the total amounts of money owed to or owed by the person and penalties levied against and owed by a person shall be public information and not exempt from disclosure.
And that's the lien.
And the lien was only for 3 years, right?
I think it's specified on the lien, so.
And was there anything more besides that? Was there anything else that was?
It speaks for itself, Mr. Speaker. It was filed, and it's on record.
And you're stating at this point that it was tobacco tax?
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? You and Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your testimony this evening. During last budget cycle, we had a lot of discussion, and there was a request from Department of Revenue and Taxation for this body to appropriate 30 positions for tax collections, and we did that. There was some pushback from some members of the body. We asked you some very pointed questions about how long it would take to fill these positions, if you had some people already waiting in the wings, how long it would take to go through DOA, and things like that. We were assured that it would take up to 90 days to fill these 30 positions. So I wanted to ask you, where are we with that, and how many positions of the 30 have been filled?
Yes, thank you for that question. I believe most of those positions on the tax side has been occupied. I believe we're really looking at only the vehicle registration and driver's license right now. They were waiting from DOA to actually do the interviews. Hopefully, our communication with Department of Administration saying we'll probably be, by the end of the month, we'll be probably getting a listing of those qualified positions for our interview. On the tax side, I believe all of the collection that we basically got, we probably have, I think we have about 5 already, so we're looking at 3 more. And for the regulatory, I think we have all 4 in already. So, and then for the CIB, I think we have several that are in. So it's just basically waiting for working with Department of Administration to get more listings from the department. So as soon as we get them, we're going to actually work on them right away.
Mr. Camacho, for the collection side, we went over this, and there was a little bit of back and forth. You gave us an estimate for each collection agent that we could anticipate about $1 million in tax revenues collected. Is that correct?
For each what?
For each revenue agent that we employ at Department of Revenue and Tax, it was the information that was given to this body was that we could anticipate about $1 million in tax revenue collected per individual collection agent.
Yeah, basically that's a figure that we look at.
So how many?
All the collections that we have on an annual basis and how many revenue officers we have.
Okay.
So we
understood. So how many revenue collections agents did we appropriate in the last fiscal year?
I believe there's 10 new ones, but I think we're at 5 right now. I think it gets a little bit complicated because for FY17 we had to have we got a cut. I guess everybody had to take the burden of a cut, and I think we reduced that basically for now that 10 to 8. Because of the recent cut.
I understand cutting in different divisions,
yes.
But we should not be cutting on revenue collection side. These are the people that are bringing in the money that we so desperately need.
Yes, but we're still pursuing that. But what I'm saying is that we already have 5 of those people in working, and also in the revenue agent series that was allowed. I think we were allowed also 5. I think we have we actually have 5. working already for the revenue agencies.
Understood. So what's the holdup? How come we're not at 100% capacity? You said we still might have three outstanding?
Yeah, we're working with the Department of Administration
Okay.
on the listing, so basically that's where we're at right now.
We were assured that these positions would be completely filled within 90 days. That's 3 months. We're here out about 9 months. And so my question to you is, when can we anticipate 100% of the revenue collections being filled?
As soon as we get those listings from the Department of Administration, like I said earlier, we will work on it right away, Senator. Hopefully, if we get all those names within this month and next month.
Mr. Byrne, when can he anticipate receiving the list of names that he's waiting on so that we can fill these revenue collection positions?
Senator, as Mr. Camacho said, we've prioritized the revenue collecting positions. These other positions we'll have to him by the end of the month.
By the end of the month?
Yes.
That's something that we work with personnel also.
It just doesn't, you say that it's a priority, but it just doesn't seem like it's a priority to me. If it's going to take over 9 months to get a list from DOA to Department of Revenue and Taxation for us to get revenue collection agents into this government, it just doesn't seem like a priority. I mean, what would you say to members of the community that would have concerns about this? That we are leaving money on the table, millions and millions of dollars. What would your response to them be?
Well,
please help me to understand.
Well, part of the delay, I believe, is the on the driver's license and vehicle registration. I believe is an update of the PD, something that we needed to work because of the Real ID Act. So something that we closed that some time ago. We got a word from DOA that by the end of the month we should be getting a list on those driver's license and vehicle registrations part. So it's just a matter of timing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you else have any questions of these? Go ahead.
Just a quick question, just so we can kind of connect the dots here. Mr. Camacho, can you just give us a quick review of what the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, how does it impact business?
The business part basically there's two parts. One is the withholding, which basically the employees side, where there's probably an average of 3% reduction on the withholding side. The other part really is the reduction in the corporate rate. That the high rate was at 35. Now it's down to one rate, which is 21%. So I believe the impact of that reduction on the corporate side, I think it was if I recall, it was about $40 million based on last fiscal year's projection. So that's a big drop on the corporate side.
So on the corporate side of taxes, there's a decrease in them having to pay 14% less, and
yes.
then for the employees, 3% less.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good evening, gentlemen and ladies. I'm going to make a general statement because I find it very difficult to hear a testimony, Mr. Chairman, that says, I want to remind the public that this administration has cut costs by $31 million. And the first thought that crossed my mind is, I want to remind us in this room, all inclusive, that we work for the public. We work for the taxpayers. And in this particular case, this proposal and other similar proposals are asking the public to absorb additional, to really increase their taxes. their contribution to the operations of this government. So I really take exception to that particular statement, and I had to say, really, that statement, bottom line, is it's not reminding the public of any cost cutting. It's reminding ourselves that we work for the public, so it's an obligation that we have. Secondly, I have a quick question, because I know there's been word going out there, and Mr. Speaker, this is in direct relation to funds affiliated, general funds that will be collected out there. So if you would grant me the indulgence. First of all, I want to commend the administration for recruiting 29 additional customs officers, or moving in that direction, because certainly our customs officers, our men and women in uniform, are in need not only of the reinforcements, but I know a number of them who are just working extensive hours. So I want to commend you in that regard. My question is there any general fund contribution towards the operations of customs and quarantine per fiscal year, aside from their $14.3 or $14.8 million of customs user fees that they generate on an annual basis? Is there any additional general fund that is utilized to pay for customs costs and operations?
It's too early to say what's going to happen this year, Senator, but in past years, the general fund has been called upon to subsidize the specific fund collections for the Customs Department has fallen short by about $1 million.
Thank you, Mr. Burns, for your recollection, because there was an oversight hearing or discussion on customs and quarantine where, in fact, they alluded to and recognized that general fund is supporting customs operations by $1.2 million. Now, with the recruitment of an additional 29 customs officers, which I highlighted and I continue to support because it's recognized that the agency needs that additional support of personnel. Now, based on very rough estimates, that would increase the general fund contribution by an additional $1.1 million. So without any customs user fee adjustments, that would be about $2.3 million on an annualized basis, where general fund would have to absorb the cost of the operations of our customs and quarantine. What I'm leading up to is the Speaker has, and the good chairperson of Customs and Quarantine, has advocated for increasing the customs user fee. Has there been any proposal that has been presented by the administration, written proposal forwarded to members of this body, other than an oversight roundtable or discussion on possible increases in the customs user fees? So, with the endorsement of several members in this legislative body publicly, that they would consent to an adjustment in the customs user fees, recognizing the need to not only recruit additional personnel, but upgrade their equipment, the use of technology, so that in fact they can eradicate the drug problem that's coming in to our island. There has yet to be a proposal forwarded by administration personnel to offset the anticipated approximately $2.3 million of general fund support. So I bring that up, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for your indulgence, because it tells me that in light of those discussions at the oversight hearing or the roundtable discussion, where a number of senators had shared their support for the idea of increasing the fees so that we can reinforce the drug interdiction at our borders, there still has yet to be any proposal forwarded by the administration. And I find that using a word that was used a little earlier, disconcerting. I really find that very disconcerting, because it just tells me that that's another reason to force the question on the general fund and to force the question on taxpayers that you need to be able to support us, inclusive of the recruitment of additional customs personnel. So I wanted to share that. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony. with Mr. Carson, the BBR circulars worn out, I believe anticipating the repeal of the sales tax or sales tax repeal. I understand, there's another step this body has to take tomorrow regarding that measure. However, with these measures before us this evening, should this body cannot move forward and get these measures through, are you already anticipating still pursuing much more aggressively those circulars? I understand. I'm not sure how many agencies those were sent to, but I did receive the ones towards Department of Education, and I was reviewing those. Are you able to provide this body the information on the overall substantial cuts or those reductions made specific to those BBMR circulars that went out, I believe, 2 weeks ago?
Thank you, Senator Morrison. We did send out the circulars that you're referring to, and we did get responses from general fund funded agencies, because that's where the cuts, would be taken. And we did get responses from the departments if you were to have a further reduced budget, and it's formulaic, whatever the word is. So it's like a pro rata share of the existing budget spread out amongst the recipients of the general fund. And their responses similarly to what happens when this body passes the budget and a particular agency gets a lump sum amount of money, then we turn to them and ask them how they're going to allocate that money. And then 45 days after the beginning of the fiscal year, there's a allocation report that's due to this legislature that shows what monies are going to be allocated by the department for its use in personnel, contractual, rent, utilities. But that's basically driven by the department. And then that report is sent down here so this body can see what it is that was, how the lump sum budget was allocated for use in the fiscal year. So we did receive responses, and if it's your desire for us to put those responses together and provide it, we can do that.
Certainly appreciate that, because I know we've just been hearing, at least from the education officials, what that would look like for their agencies. And,
I don't have anything from the Department of Education, though.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'm just bringing this up in light, understanding being here for several of these attempts to figure out how we address this impact to our government resources, and I just, I appreciate what you're attempting to do, Mr. Speaker. However, it just seems that we're not figuring out where we're going to get to. I just want to make sure that I put on record that those circulars have gone out, they're in process, and seeming like they're in anticipation that this body may not be able to get anything through. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify? Peter John? Oh. Yeah, you have a question. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Through this through this whole process, I'm looking at everything. I just want you to, to be aware of that and every possibility to look for revenue. And I think the concern the public has is that we don't necessarily see those creative solutions coming from the executive branch, as my colleague had alluded to earlier, with regards to outside funding from the passenger fee to fund customs, as opposed to using general fund appropriation that could go to more revenue collections officers or police officers. I think that's important, and it was also disconcerting to me that not a single dollar went to the hospital to address the immediate issues of CMS funding, which could result in a loss of $30+ million of all the tax amnesty, did any of that tax amnesty money get logged into, get deposited and tagged as supplemental income?
Well, we handle the amnesty program, but as far as the spending of the amnesty, I would prefer that Ed would answer that question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we've already had the discussions, and basically, in large part, it's already gone. And then the other 20 million that you guys are going to collect is going to disappear too. It's definitely not going to the hospital. We have confirmed that. The question I do have you looked within your organization to see if there are areas of missed collection or perhaps improvements in performance? There was something I caught that I wanted to just bring up to your attention with regards to exemptions that have been claimed under the GRT. Are you aware that from fiscal year 2014 to fiscal year 2016 of the exemptions claimed from the Dave Santos Act? Do you know what that amount is per the last audit?
I don't know the exact amount, but I know in the past, because it varies from year, I think from year to year, not from year to year, but at times they changed the law. I know the Dave Santos started way back that if you basically made, even at one time, it's $500,000 is the threshold. Yeah. And then right now it's currently at 50.
Did you know that if you look at those, if you were to even trend those years, that it really didn't change much at all? Would you be surprised to know that it pretty much stayed consistent at about $100 million?
The numbers, I know in the past we try to quantify the amounts. I know sometimes it varies from 12 to 15 to $20 million.
Oh, so no, I mean, I'm looking in the audit.
You're talking about the exemptions, but I'm talking about tax.
Well, specifically to Dave Santos, because that's a flat exemption, and that requires that your gross is under that amount, correct? So, you know, if you were to just do the backwards math, right, if only, say, one business can only claim up to 50,000 in exemptions, and per the law, they have to be under, right? They can't, once they go over that, then they've claimed it, and then they have, you know, they're over that gross amount and they're paying GRT every year. That's it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Basically it's a yearly test. The look back period is normally currently is 50,000. If you made less than 50,000 in a particular activity, because Dave Santos there's a lot. Yeah. You're talking about retail, service.
And I understand the law. It's just, you know, again, I'm looking at the numbers, and, you know, and I'm just bringing it up because it's not necessarily passing the common sense test for me. But if you do the backwards math of what the consistent exemptions have been year after year, claimed exemptions of about 100 million, give or take, up, but on the lowest end, 100 million. That means there's 2,000 businesses out there that gross less than 50,000 a year. And I'm not sure, I mean, it might be worth looking at your records, but I think that's more indicative of businesses just claiming 50,000, even though their gross revenues are in excess. I think they're just claiming this business.
I think we have a mechanism that tracks that. In other words, every month you accumulate those exemptions. Once
you hit the 50,000
then you have to pay.
Exactly, but that's not. If you look at the law, right? Once you've broken that threshold, I think businesses are claiming that exemption. I think there's a misunderstanding in how that works, and I think businesses are claiming that year after year. That's the only way to explain that consistent number. And so I don't think it's a true reflection on the taxable revenue if they're claiming 60,000 in exemptions. That's not, the way that was designed was an exemption as long as you're under that threshold.
Yes.
Now if you look at the numbers, sorry, Mr. Speaker, this is the last point. If you look at the numbers, it's obvious that businesses, regardless of their gross in excess of the limits of Dave Santos, are still claiming those exemptions year after year. So as we're looking for funding, and every little bit counts, the 2.6 million can go a long way to even rev and tax. So I would just encourage that you look into that, because the numbers are not adding up. I don't believe there are 2,000 small businesses claiming right under 50,000 per annum.
Yeah, we can look into that, Senator. Yes.
Vice Speaker.
Go finin it na.
We're on Bill 314 and 15,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, my testimony is very short. Buenas noches, speakers and members ng Sina Committee. My name is Benita Manglonia. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Guam Memorial Hospital. Thank you for recognizing the importance of taking responsibility in preparing a responsible budget. While it is not popular to raise taxes, you're left without a choice. What is reckless and irresponsible is to allow this government to fall off a fiscal cliff, thereby reducing critical government services to the community it serves. This will mean cutting funding requirements to the hospital, the schools, the police, the fire department, and countless other government services will be severely impacted. The projected shortfall of approximately $150 million will not be covered by cutting services without impacting massive numbers of government employees. These cuts will have a ripple effect in the economy, thereby directly impacting businesses that rely on these employees or the government as their customer. Your bill is to remove the sunset provision of September 30 and increase BPT by an additional 0.5%. If the Trump tax cut did not happen, we definitely won't be having this discussion tonight. Since 2016, Mr. Speaker, the hospital has been pushing for a dedicated funding source by supporting the proposal to raise BPT. Unfortunately, we could not get majority support. In March this year, after endless compelling testimonies, the 2% sales tax was passed, allocating 0.75% of 1% to GMH. Unfortunately, that funding source was short-lived before it even took effect with its recent repeal. Tomorrow, you have called session to attempt an override, which will likely happen. Now, because of the Trump tax cut, a decision must be made to raise BPT or be faced with a draconian cut to services requiring to lay off massive number of employees. This is an election year, and many do not want to make this hard decision. But you are all elected to make the hard decision, and this is that time. Mr. Speaker, thank you for recognizing the need to provide $30 million in direct subsidy to GMH as written in your Budget Bill 323. While we support your proposal to remove the sunset provision and increase BPT by 0.5%, we respectfully request that you add language to Bill 315 and Bill 323 allocating 0.75% to GMH. We have provided endless testimonies for a continued and sustainable direct subsidy to GMH so it can properly plan both its short-term and long-term needs. To give credence to your wisdom and effort in increasing taxes, I just want to share with this body what our brothers and sisters in the CNMI are paying for business privilege tax and occupancy tax. Business privilege tax in the CNMI pay 5%. 5% for businesses making $750,000 per year, and a graduated rate for businesses making less than $750,000. They've been at this rate for a long time. Wholesalers pay 2% for those making over $50,000 a year, Agriculture and fisheries pay 1% for those making over $20,000 per year. The hotel occupancy tax was increased from 10% in 2013 to 15%, and their occupancy has steadily increased from 83% and has maintained an average of over 90% since 2017. The Japanese market has gone up 20%. So there you have those numbers. I mean, we can learn also from our neighbors. But please, por favor, Mr. Speaker, mga malefa na ispitat, mga malefa na sinaispitat na pon pega gizomo budget bill, the nesti bill 314, and 315. It's dedicated funding pa ispitat sa inawa haga sa in mumuzig in 2016 na man mafatom magi zen gagagawzi na put favor ajuda ispitat don pigawzi neji dedicated funding sa kosaki sinya mapladnuzi mo na maulik ikinalamting ispitat na po fan maajuda sa man malongo si Diyos maasi.
Si Diyos maasi, Benita. Peter John.
Buenas noches, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Peter John Camacho, Administrator for the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. I'm here to present testimony on Bills 314-34 and 315-34 that seek to raise revenues for the government of Guam by raising revenues through increases on the business privilege tax and the hotel occupancy tax. This effort to create new revenues by asking our people to pay more is going to be an admittedly uphill battle. A friend said to me as we spoke about the challenges we face at GMH, the difficult we do at once, the impossible takes a bit longer. This motto is actually part of the CBs and begins stating, with willing hearts and skillful hands, the difficult we do at once, the impossible takes a bit longer. The willing hearts and skillful hands could just as easily be describing the professionals who work at all levels of the GMHA as those CBs that can transform landscapes to what is needed. We ask our staff to do many great things, but many times with technology that is not state-of-the-art. That we could provide that level of service would be a significant achievement where the skills and commitment are matched by available equipment, supplies, and medication. All this for the goal of better patient outcomes. By the same token, its citizens depend on government for many things. Without some of these services, especially as related to education, public safety, and health, there would likely be more challenges for the people of our island home. Truth be told, prices steadily rise, whether it be due to the cost of bringing in the goods our people want, or how costly it is to grow or manufacture these items. Services also follow similar challenges. For our brothers and sisters who need help, we have assistance programs across many areas. Perhaps these need to be enhanced so that no one is left wanting. But this requires funding to become a reality across all sectors. Senators, you are challenged to do the right thing, which isn't always the most popular and surely not the easiest. Remember, the difficult we do at once, the impossible takes a bit longer. Por respeto.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Did you, oh, Mr. Carlos, I'm sorry, yes.
I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker and Senators. I'm testifying in favor of Bill number 315-34. My name is John Carlos. I'm a retired banking, insurance securities, and real estate regulator. During the duration of my employment with government of Guam, I have experienced pay cuts that were necessary during the period of economic recessions. These pay cuts were restored as the economy improved. By acting proactively, coupled with the increase in military bases construction projects, government of Guam was able to generate enough funding for essential government services. If not for the timely action taken by our policymakers and leaders of government of Guam, the finances of the island of Guam and the government's ability to pay expenses and municipal debts would be in question. Other territories, namely the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands and Puerto Rico, have not paid much attention to the generation of government revenues sufficient to pay their debts and municipal bonds. The result is bankruptcy. No lender will lend for lack of stable population of taxpayers. Not much revenue is being generated. In the absence of stable working population, a stable taxpayer base, there will be little economic incentive for lenders to lend and investors to invest in these jurisdictions. If we follow the economic news in the 50 states and in Guam, there are plenty of jobs, but there is lack of willing and skilled workers. Guam Community College and the University of Guam have provided education to skilled workers and professionals, but still some skills and professional competence in the building industry as well as in the computer industry are not yet there to provide addition to a stable taxpayers base. A resident of Guam might ask, given that the economy is doing good, what reasons prohibit or restrict the island of Guam from generating adequate funding for public education, public health, and surplus funds to pay for tax refunds? The big reason is the enactment of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Public Law 11597. Corporations that are domiciled in the United States of America have been complaining that the U.S. federal corporate income tax is very high. The highest rate is at 35%. U.S. corporations claim that 35% U.S. corporate income tax make them less competitive in comparison with other foreign companies from China, European Union countries. To address this competitive tax disadvantage on U.S. corporations, the U.S. Congress took action and enacted the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. As a result of the enactment of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the U.S. Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation sent a joint letter to the U.S. Ways and Means Committee Chair, Kevin Brady, that U.S. corporate tax shall drop from the current tax rates of 35% to a single rate of 21%. This is a 14% tax cut for U.S. corporations. This tax cut is permanent. For the individual filer, the tax foundation indicates that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act increase in the after-tax income of taxpayers in every taxpayer group in 2018 would see an average increase in after-tax income ranging from 0.08 to 1.7%. Taxpayers in the top 1% would see an increase in after-tax income on a static basis. In short, every individual taxpayer would pay less U.S. federal income tax on a minimal basis in comparison to the 14% federal corporate tax. What is the effect of the job cuts and tax cut and jobs cut in Guam? I've heard testimonies here indicating the corporate tax alone in tax cut would be amount to 40 million, maybe more. I have not heard any specific amount as far as the effect in the reduction of individual income tax. The U.S. corporate and individual income tax revenues by the government collected by the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation are remitted directly to the Guam Treasury. In addition, U.S. individual income taxes that are paid by federal employees who are stationed in Guam are remitted to the U.S. Treasury, are remitted by the U.S. Treasury to the government of Guam Treasury. As revenues from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act decreases for the federal government, the government of Guam revenues from U.S. corporate and individual income tax will also decrease directly and in proportion to the tax cuts for Guam corporate and individual taxpayers. It must be pointed out that in the 50 states, the U.S. corporate and individual income tax revenues collected by the states are remitted to the U.S. Treasury and not to the respective state treasury of its individual state. Why then is there a big disparity of the effect of the tax cut and jobs cut on Guam compared with the other 50 states? The Tax Foundation website provides some facts on burden of state taxes. These state taxes that are imposed in the 50 states are apart. They are distinct. They are separate. And in addition to the U.S. corporate and individual income taxes that are imposed by the U.S. federal government. As an example, California has a state corporate tax that is distinct and separate from U.S. corporate income tax. The 50 states rely on their own state taxes and not on the U.S. corporate and individual income tax to fund public safety, public health, and education. Some of the taxes that are imposed by the 50 states and on which they rely are state corporate income tax, state individual income tax, property tax, taxes on oil, liquor, tobacco, and gambling, and sales taxes. Bill number 31534 proposes a gross receipts tax increase from 5% to 5.5%. Is this proposal reasonable? The available data for sales taxes for the 50 states has been gathered and is posted in the website of the Tax Foundation. A tax map showing the rate of sales tax that is imposed in the 50 states is reproduced in this testimony. A comparison of the sales taxes imposed by the 50 states show that the highest rate is at 9.46% in Tennessee. The lowest, I believe, is around 6%. It is my belief that the increase in gross sales tax appears to be reasonable. Another factor to consider in favor of the increase in gross sales tax is that U.S. corporations doing business in Guam are now paying and will continue to pay reduced 21% tax in lieu of the former rate of 35%. To remain competitive, U.S. corporations can now afford and have the ability to reduce the price of their goods and services by a corresponding increase in gross receipts tax, and possibly in other forms of taxes as well. I have as well attached in this testimony the rate of corporate tax and individual income tax that are imposed by the other 50 states. Thank you for your patience in hearing my testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos. I'm sorry, did I forget to call anybody over here? I thought I went through the names. I didn't want, did any of you wish to testify? Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure, because when I went through the list, I hope I didn't mispronounce any names that made it a problem for two, that I neglected you. Did you wish to say something?
To make one comment on Bill 315.
Go ahead.
I know we increased the BPT in April to 1%, but we didn't increase the use tax, which is equivalent of the GRT. So I think maybe there should be a consideration that if this is going to go up to 5.5%, normally the use tax and GRT are equate. In other words, you might see some tax leakages in the future where people will want to actually bring in their products and pay at a lower rate than paying the 5.5%. So that's something that you might want to consider.
And how well have you been collecting the use tax over the last 10 years?
Well, basically, anything that you collect, basically it's at 2 million, 3 million, I believe. But, the rate may make a difference. I mean, if you're buying an equipment of $100,000 and you're only going to pay $4,000 because the use tax is $4,000, and you look at here, you're going to pay that $5,500, so it may make a difference.
And how are the audits reported your ability to be able to collect the use tax?
We are collecting, but I'm just talking about the concept of use tax and GRT go hand in hand. In other words, that's my point.
All right. Any questions? Go ahead. Just at 9:30, we have to shut down to let the thing record. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And actually, this is not reference to your component, but I wanted to add to the record a statement with regards to Section 2. I would like to propose an amendment to Section 2 of both bills. Section 2 seeks to repeal the requirement for the approval of voters of Guam in referendum on any locally enacted and administered tax increase. Rather than repealing the requirement for the people of Guam to participate in the decisions of the Guam legislature, I am proposing that you and the committee strongly consider amending both Bill number 314-34 and Bill number 315-34 to include the following language: repeal and reenact subsection 16311 of Article 3, Chapter 16, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring an advisory referendum whereby the voters of Guam are to symbolically express their approval or disapproval of any local tax increase proposed by the Guam legislature, and providing that no such increase shall take effect until 90 calendar days have elapsed from the general election at which the voters express their symbolic approval or disapproval of the same. I have attached a copy of Bill number 308, that's 34 COR. My proposed amendment to your bills would require an advisory referendum whereby the voters of Guam are to express their approval of any local tax increase proposed by this or any legislature, and that no such tax increase would take effect until 90 calendar days have lapsed from a general election. This amendment combines the restriction of the Organic Act and the will of the people excuse me, in such a manner that the current legislative body would have 2 whole months to consider the sentiments of the people prior to the implementation of any tax increase. This consideration would be extended to the incoming legislative body, who would have 30 days to act on the results of the advisory referendum. I believe the will of our people is binding. However, this referendum is a non-binding advisory referendum. We can have a referendum that does not have any force of law and which only advises the legislature as to the popular sentiment on the proposed question. If the current or incoming legislative body doesn't act on the results of the advisory referendum, then they don't need to act on it. This is why it is a symbolic expression of the people's views. Our people are feeling it now. The tax increase in April, call it a temporary tax increase or a general sales tax, all translates to how far will your dollar take you and your families. They feel it every time they pay their utilities, their rent, their mortgages, or purchase food or gas. We increase taxes on our people and think that 1 or 2 public hearings on increasing taxes translates to the people saying yes to increasing taxes. I have to disagree. We must do more to ensure that our people have every opportunity to engage with their government and be part of decisions that affect their quality of life, and I believe that an advisory referendum would afford the people of Guam that opportunity. I have attached a copy of the legislation for your consideration as an amendment to these 2 measures. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions of this panel?
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Camacho, you know, we all understand we have historic issues collecting the use tax through the mail. And I think that you're referring to are the businesses that do a lot of transshipment or larger items through the port, but there's a huge gap, I think, in regards to the retail market. Primarily, it's the businesses are the only ones that pay the use tax. Now, prior to when we were talking about the sales tax, I understand that there were talks and discussions with Amazon about application of our existing taxes or our GRT. With the court case, have you looked into that?
Yes, we looked into that, and we don't really have a sales tax right now. I mean, we do, but if it doesn't go through, then
and that's confirmed. That it has to have the name sales tax?
I think it does apply also to the business privilege tax also, so that's one of the reasons why
or the use tax, because all are just gross percentages on the value, right?
Yes.
The assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I don't know if you went ahead and did it, but about a week ago I submitted a request for an opinion on application of the use tax based on the court's ruling. I haven't heard anything back, but I will send you the information once I get that opinion. But I would have hoped that you would have been a bit more proactive on that if you hadn't to look into additional revenues, because that is an existing law. That hasn't been enforced for God knows how long.
I think we discussed this issue sometimes back, but we still need to tweak the law, because I don't think.
But what I'm saying is, I'm about to.
The current law. I'm talking about the current law.
Why would you have to tweak the current law?
Because I don't think when a vendor collects on Apple government, they're not going to say whether this is exempt or not. And the current law basically now says that there are exemptions on use tax. So that's something that we need.
But purchases in part, because. Yes. We have wholesalers.
But what if?
Part are retail.
Yeah, that's true. But what if it's an exempt organization that's buying it? They're not. They're exempt from paying use tax. So those are the things that we really need. And there's even right now there's exemptions for. I think there's a $1,000 limit
Okay.
Those things we need to actually.
We need to work on,
Yeah.
on that together, because those can always be applied in a rebate after we've actually collected the money. So there are a lot of options available, but once the Attorney General opines, based on the recent Supreme Court decision, then I think we'll have more to discuss.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The time is now 9:25. I've been informed by the MIS that we need to cut so that they can tape. I'll just adjourn this hearing at this point.